I call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Now, I'm going to make a couple of statements before we get started. One is I'm going to change the order of the agenda, and after our representation of the communications and before our motions on the consent agenda, we're going to go ahead and have our budget discussion. So that's going to be coming up fairly quickly. It will be right after open forum, and we do have some open forum requests this evening. Second, I wanted to make a couple of statements about school closing, because that's something that the board has heard quite a bit about in the last couple of weeks, and the superintendent is going to make a presentation during the meeting on some suggestions of what we, the board, might consider as we look forward to making sure that we are addressing our budget properly. And in there, he will discuss things, all sorts of different ideas. We have not seen these yet, but they will be presented later. I want to talk a little bit about closing schools, though. The board has a policy, and it's 501.05, and the policy is titled Closing Schools. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, because it's quite a bit. It's 2¼ pages of words. But the board adopts to follow certain guidelines as set forth in a ruling. And the guidelines are as follows. And we have to set up timelines. We have to talk with the community. There are a whole lot of things that the board has to do and that the district has to do before a school could even be closed. And on number 5A, it talks about the process/timeline. And it says, whenever the board considers the possibility of closing an attendance facility, the following timeline or process shall be followed to ensure adequate representation by all parties involved. A, the board shall consider all the factors for consideration required by law and outlined in this procedure. Upon making an initial determination an attendance facility should be closed, the board shall adopt a resolution stating its intention to close the attendance facility at the close of the current school year. The resolution shall be adopted on or before the second Monday in October of the school year in which the board is proposing the closing. And the reason I indicate that is that these rules are very, very specific. Closing a facility is nothing that would be taken lightly. I know that there are a lot of people that are concerned for a lot of reasons for this, but be aware that it's very prescriptive in our policy. It would be very careful, and the superintendent later on in his presentation will talk a little bit more about how something like that would be considered if it was considered. So I don't want to go on too long because this may be a long meeting anyway. With that, we'll get on with our meeting. Director DeFau, would you please read our board priorities?
The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff, and direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Thank you. Director Snyder, would you please read our mission and vision statements?
Our mission statement reads, to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Our vision statement reads, education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. Superintendent Tate, we have a showcase.
Do you want to do student board reports first?
Oh, I apologize. Student board reports, yes.
So let's start with Central. Caitlin?
Central's football team has their playoff game at Linmar on Wednesday, and the dance team competed at a competition this past Saturday, and we competed in 3 different categories, hoop, pom, and hip-hop, and we actually got first in hoop and then like third or something in hip-hop, and did really well, and it was a good experience for us.
Our student hunger drive is still going on, and we had our district cross-country meet last Thursday for both boys and girls. We didn't run too well. We had a kind of disappointing performance, but wait till next year.
Our Project Lead the Way group just received a $15,000 grant from MIT Lemonson Foundation, which they're using to pursue a bracelet for heat stroke type of related events called Endotherm.
And we are in the midst of preparing for our fall musical, Grease. We actually have a small performance for the parents tonight. And then also in the middle of food drive, we have our last dodgeball event tomorrow, and we've got a Freddie Falcon spirit pageant, so it's a male pageant on Friday. So we're doing lots of fun events.
North had a few people get into the All-State. We had our first oboist and a first violinist, and then we have 5 are in for choir and 2 people are alternates. And likewise, we didn't do that great at district cross country.
So our student hunger drive is also in full swing, just like Central's, and I'm pretty sure all the high schools. We did Stop the Bop at school, and we raised over $200, which was our goal. And this week is our Spirit Week, so we're all dressing up, doing things like costumes, and we did, I think we did sports teams today. And then also we're having a tip night tomorrow night at Chick-fil-A, so if anybody's want to come, that'd be awesome. Anything else?
Show.
Oh, and we also have a play this fall, and it's for November 7th and 8th, and it's called Children of a Lesser God.
All right. Thank you, student board members. Thank you, Superintendent Tate. Now we'll move on to the showcase.
Thank you, Mr. President. Truman Elementary School, Principal McMeekin, and others, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mary McMeekin. I'm principal at Truman. I'm going to turn it over today to Taylor Varner. She's going to present our school for you. Tiffany Fogelsong, I'd like to thank her, our media specialist, for helping with create the PowerPoint, and then our Sam, Elizabeth Brennick, helped as well. So take it away, Taylor.
Good evening. My name is Taylor Varner, and I was the Biztown mayor for Truman Elementary. Some of you may recognize me from Truman Open House and ribbon cutting. I was the one helping the mayor, Gluba, cut the ribbon. We want to thank you for allowing us to showcase our great school. Our school is taking the opportunity for our recent construction to break down walls and build up kids. We do this by starting each day with our Timberwolves pledge. I've made a copy. You might want to read along. Today I pledge to be the best possible me. No matter how good I am, I know I can become better. Today I pledge to build on the work of yesterday, which will lead me into the rewards of tomorrow. Today I pledge to feed my mind knowledge, my body strength, and my spirit faith. Today I pledge to reach for new goals, new challenges, and new horizons. Today I pledge to listen to the beat of my drummer, who leads me onward in search of my dreams. We build each other up by helping our community. We helped local homeless shelters by having Socktober. We collected over 190 pairs of socks. We welcome new friends to the building. This year, Truman added 3 classrooms of students with special needs. We strengthen our bodies each morning and noon with free breakfast and lunch. Hy-Vee also supplied healthy snacks for us on Healthy Walk Day. All the students walked around the track and had lots of fun doing it. Our teachers build us up with their lessons and telling us what we will learn each day and giving examples. They also encourage us to read and visit our new library often. Another great thing about tearing down walls is the construction workers built. They built a new Fines Art Wing. Now, music, art, gym, and orchestra and band are in one location. The rooms are nice and big, and there is room to move around. You can see that orchestra even has room to practice. Our teachers build us up each day with cool lessons, kind words, and making us feel at home. Finally, we couldn't be better people and students without showing our appreciation for our new building. You can even see that kids appreciate the new bathroom. Thank you, and come and visit us anytime.
Are you ready for questions?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Questions or comments by the board? Director Dickman.
I'm just curious what your future plans are. You're doing wonderful so far. What do you want to do when you grow up?
I want to be mayor.
Hey, you're on the right track.
All right, anything else? Director Sherwood.
We had a wonderful woman mayor in the past that you could emulate, as a matter of fact. I think we've only had one, so you can be the next soon. What's the best thing about the new school, about the remodel?
I like the library because I really like reading, and it's fun reading there.
And how's it changed as far as how you think kids behave inside the buildings? Has that changed at all with the way the buildings changed?
I mean, it's really happy there because the new building, I like how it's like libraries in the middle and then everything's like spread out.
Yeah, beautiful place. Well, you did an excellent job. Thank you.
Anybody else? Director Snyder.
I just wanted to tell you, I think you did a fantastic job talking to us. I wouldn't have been able to do it when I was your age. You did very, very well, and keep up the good work. We're proud of you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Director Kluhl.
Well, Director Snyder brought that up, that you were able to do this, and I wouldn't have been able to do that either, nor would I have done this. You know, you guys have learned so many things. How is it that you're able to get up here and speak in front of people like this today? Do you have a secret?
No, I mean, I've done it BizTown before. I got really nervous, so.
So every time you do this, you're a little less nervous, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? All right, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move on to communications. Director Kluhl, upcoming
Yes.
events.
On October 28th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. will be the student showcase at the River City Music Experience in Davenport. On October 29th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m., the Legislative Advocacy Committee will be holding its legislative forum at Madison Elementary School. I want to invite everyone to come out for this event. It's something we do every elective cycle. We've got the majority of our state legislative candidates that are going to be coming out, and Mark Rodolfi from the Quad City Times, the editor of the editorial page, will be moderating, and so it promises to be a great event. So please do mark that on your calendar and plan to come out. On November 3rd, at 5:30 p.m., the Committee of the Whole will meet here in the Jim Hester Boardroom. November 4th is a regularly scheduled Legislative Advocacy Committee, but ironically, on the 4th of November, the day that we're all going to be out voting, we will not be meeting. But do plan to vote if you haven't already. November 5th, 4 p.m., Policy Committee here in the Executive Boardroom. And November 10th at 6 p.m., a regular meeting of the board here in the Jim Hester Boardroom. And on November 24th at 6 p.m., yet another regular meeting here in the Jim Hester Boardroom.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll move to open forum. We have 10 open forum requests this evening. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. We have 10 requests this evening, and I'll allow 2 minutes. And when you come up to the microphone and give us your name and address. And we'll start with Melissa France, and I'm going to read through these and you'll be in this order. Melissa France, Hunter Bell, Julie DeSalvo, Brinson Kinzer, Vince Urenga, Tammy Wink, Patrick Shoemaker, Alex Hunt, Anthony DeSalvo, Stephanie Hanser, H-A-N-S-E-I, huh? Looks like part of the N is missing. I apologize for that. Okay, we'll start with Melissa France.
Hi, good evening. I'm Melissa Franz. My address is 712 Prairie Meadow Drive, Bluegrass, Iowa. I just have a couple of brief comments. I wanted to come here this evening in order to speak about the changes to the schedule, so block schedule versus 7-period schedule. Personally, I'm representing both my daughter, Ashley Franz, and my niece, Bailey Ellis, who are both members of the dual grad program at North High School. One of the things that I feel would detrimentally impact the program to change from 7 periods to 4 periods, or vice versa, simply because it's now a good structure. It's very similar to what you would find in college. If you did change back to the 7 periods, I feel that the students would have a very hard time maintaining academically. Right now my daughter has straight A's, and honestly I don't know how she would maintain homework in 7 different periods, along with trying to, she's a varsity softball player, so she is, and as well as my niece. I don't feel that they would have time for both school and athletics. Overall, that's pretty much it. I don't have a whole lot else to say. I just don't think they would be able to maintain everything. So please consider that when you guys do make your decision. I understand you don't make these lightly. It's finances and it's tough times for everything. And I know some of it is due to declining enrollment. Just want to make sure, and I'm sure you guys have looked at this, but is this due to population decrease, or is this due to enrollment in competing districts such as Bettendorf PV? And if it possibly is due to cross enrollment, what can we do as a district to keep our students here and not have them enroll in competing programs. I do think the dual grad program is a great thing to have people relocate to Davenport versus Bettendorf and other districts around here. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Melissa. Next is Hunter Bell.
My name is Hunter Bell. I live at 1691 West 49th Street. I am a student at Davenport North, and I also am in the dual grad program. As it is now in our traditional 4-block schedule, we spend 20 minutes in passing time. If we were to switch to 7 periods in a day, we would end up with 35 minutes of passing time, supposing that we keep Smart Block. This leads to 15 minutes more being spent in one day's passing time, which at first may not seem like much, but it quickly adds up. In 1 week, it is 1 hour and 15 minutes. In a month, it's about 5 to 6 hours. And finally, in a typical school year that has approximately 180 days, it amounts to 45 hours. This time is better spent in the classroom, keeping our 4-block schedule. Another point is that going to a 7-period schedule will allow more teachers to be laid off, saving money, but that comes at a cost. It will cause the remaining teachers to have more students in the classroom, putting them under stress. They, of all people, don't need to be put under any stress because they are the foundation of our country. Where would we be without our teachers? Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. Next is Julie DeSalvo.
Good evening. My name is Julie DeSalvo. My address is 3929 West Garfield Street, Davenport. A story about my son. This is all about dual enrollment. Obviously, they're very smart children here this evening, so please pay attention to what they're saying. I'm sure you do that, but you got the cream of the crop here, I'm telling you. My son was to go to West. I live in West District. We chose to go to North when you all approached us a year and a half ago about the dual enrollment program. You remember me from those conversations, I'm sure. I was quite upset. I didn't understand why we had to change schools. Our experience at North has been phenomenal. My concern here, and I'm sure you're considering it, but please don't forget this dual enrollment and other programs that you've started in the Davenport schools. We're getting our competition edge back. We can't lose that. Don't take that away. North Scott High School is considering a dual enrollment program. We don't want to lose more kids to North Scott. North's enrollment this year is up by 170 students. They have the highest freshman class that they've had since the school opened in 1986. Let's not stop that momentum. I'd also like you to consider, and I just have a question about some of the dollars I quickly looked at. I wasn't going to speak tonight until my son talked me into this, so I'm not dressed appropriately either. I'm concerned about the annual salary reduction of about $79,000 per FTE. I'm asking, and I know you can't answer questions, but I hope it's been considered the loadings rate of those salaries. And what I'd also like you to consider is those that would have positions eliminated are not going to be your $79,000 a year people. They're going to be the low people on the totem pole. We know that. Those are your lower paid staff. They're not going to be the $79,000 a year employees. In addition to that, your tenured people that will remain teaching aren't going to be doing the AP classes or the dual enrollment. You're going to lower their standard of teaching to a basic class. You're wasting your resources. I work in business. I have to exempt everything and pull everything out of every staff member I have. Build on your strengths. Don't let that experienced staff go to waste by having to teach a lower grade class. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julie. Next is Brinson Kinzer.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Brinson Kinzer. I'm the mayor of Bluegrass, and I live at 304 East Lottie Street. I just wanted to come and talk, and you've touched about the school closings. I've been received several calls about the possibility of closing our school. And I just wanted to throw this out in your considerations down the road, what you would do. It would cripple the economy of Bluegrass severely if that school was closed. We have done a study, and it's a shovel-ready project to do a farm-to-market road, which is Y40. It's a road that runs from Walcott all the way to Buffalo, but our portion of that. It's ready to go. We're looking for grants to do that. That was an $80,000 plus study that we did. The other thing is we were successful in getting a grant for new traffic signals at the entrance of the school. Those are going in. That has been awarded, and those signals are going in right now. So I want to, and I've encouraged everybody to contact you with their concerns about this, but I want you to know in the developments that are coming up around Bluegrass, because folks want to attend Bluegrass School, is phenomenal. So take that into consideration. If that is on the table, I want you to know that with that school closing, what it would do to the economy of our town, what it would do to the builders of our town, what it would do to the morale of that town. I've heard nothing but great parent, teacher, community involvement with that school. We need to have that open. We are moving forward as if it is, so please have that on the table. Consider that what I've said, not only about the business, the community, the developments, but please take that into consideration if you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Brinson. Next is Vince Urenga.
Hi, my name is Vince Jurgena at 503 East Rushholm, and I'd like to talk to you about three things today. One, as an employee of the district, as an educator at Central High School, and as a parent of three students, two of them who have gone through the Davenport Community Schools, and one who's currently attending. I would ask, and I know these are very, very tough decisions about cutting the budget. I understand that, but I would implore the board to look in every area before you make cuts to the people that are most face-to-face with our students. That's paramount. And I'm going to say something very unpopular, but I think you should even look within positions in this building as areas that could be cut. Okay. Secondly, the idea of going from traditional or block schedule to traditional. I taught on the traditional schedule for many years at West, and then I was a teacher at Central. I'm going to talk to that from a personal perspective. I have a son who's a freshman, and while he was in middle school and had 7 periods a day, he struggled a lot with organizational issues. He had some attention deficit issues that were diagnosed, and we really went through a lot of interventions to try to get him on track. Now that he's a freshman in high school, he's got 4 courses. He's doing much, much better, and I think that for kids that struggle with organization, block scheduling is such a great idea. So please keep that in mind as well. Lastly, the issue of if we have families leaving the Davenport district, I think we need to ask ourselves and perhaps set up exit interviews or something to say, why are you leaving? What is it about Davenport Community Schools that, is it something that's driving you away? Is there something better in other districts? But I think we need to ask ourselves those questions, and if there's a perception issue here with the Davenport Community Schools, we need to address that. You know, again, I had had kids that went through here. I believe strongly in the Davenport Community School District. I believe enough that if I get a paycheck from this district, it should be good enough to send my own kids to. And I think that's something that we need to look at very, very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Next is Tammy Wink.
My name is Tammy Wink, 6188 135th Street in Bluegrass, and I am here tonight to talk about the Bluegrass community. I have often been asked, why do I like living out there? And I am at a loss of words when I try to describe the many reasons, because Bluegrass community can't be described in words. It's a feeling, it's a way of life. Our elementary school is at the heart of our community. My children are the 3rd generation Bluegrass Elementary students, and the impact of losing our school would be devastating to us and our community. The value of our elementary school goes beyond test scores. It is the heartbeat of our town. People move there to be in one of the best elementary schools in the state. If we lose our school, it will change our community. Please consider other options to balance the budget so we can keep our community and our way of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Next is Patrick Shoemaker.
I'm Patrick Shoemaker. I reside in Iowa City for
1440 East Bloomington Street. I teach at West High. Taught with Vince there. I, too, am a veteran of the traditional schedule as well, when it was 5 periods a day. I'd like to address the proposed switch from block to a 6-period teaching load under the proposed change of traditional schedule. It doubles the administrative load for teachers. It will impact how those teachers interact with students in numerous ways and the time available that they have for each student. And so I'd like you to consider, even though the reduction in teaching force may seem like a simple kind of switch, it will have multiple impacts upon the students. And that's what our district is about. It's about those students and that interface, educational interface with teachers. So I would like you to look at that very carefully and consider that when you are making that decision. Thank you.
Patrick, I was so intent in listening, I don't recall if you gave us your address. You did? Okay, thank you. Next is Alex Hunt.
My name is Alex Hunt, and I live at 4045 West Garfield Street, and I'm here today addressing the change to traditional from block scheduling. And my first point is the lengths of the class and what they can do in the class with the extended time. They get more time to interact with the students and to help them understand what they're working on with anything really, even writing papers and doing worksheets and everything. And with the block system, you get fewer kids in the class, so then teachers can work more one-on-one with them. And once assignments are turned in, they are given back to the students quicker, so they have more time to think about what they can do better and what they can do to improve them. Also, it lets transportation be easier to other schools for ROTC or engineering programs. And a big thing with the engineering programs at West, which is where I go, is if you're working on something for 30 minutes, you basically get nowhere because it takes a little time to start getting into it and everything. And with the longer class periods, you have more time to get into what you're working on. And then my last point is, I know we're not allowed to ask questions, but think about why we changed to block schedule in the first place. And I believe that it helped us. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Next is Anthony DeSalvo.
Hi, I'm Anthony DeSalvo. I live at 3929 West Garfield Street. And I'm a sophomore at North High. I'm also in the dual grad program. And I'd like to point out, like Miss France and even my mom said earlier, I'm really concerned about the dual grad program. We introduced it with a 4-block schedule, and going to a 7-period schedule, I'm scared about how it would affect the classes overall, like our teachers and our students, because I know it was all planned around this, and I think that it's putting it at risk. It's risking our success. And also, I know that we have to take 7 college courses, 7 dual credit courses, both our junior and senior years. And so with a 7-period schedule, that'd be 1 semester long, 4 in one semester, 3 in the other. That's 4 college finals that our junior students would be taking all at once. 16 and 17-year-old kids taking 4 college finals. There are college students that don't take that many finals in one day. Also, our classes. The classes that would probably be getting cut with these 23 teachers will be our higher level classes because we wouldn't get as many opportunities. I know that at North right now there's an AP Spanish program, and there wouldn't be nowhere near as much access to that program as there is right now if we went to 7-period scheduling. Our freshmen, if they hadn't taken Spanish 1 before this change, then they won't be able to finish all 4 years of their foreign language. And that's true with any core class. If we start with the most basic math, we can only take one per year until our senior year, which means we can't get into that AP Calc class or that AP Stats class. Also, if a student, God forbid, if a student were to fail a class, let's say in the first semester, they can take it right away in the second semester. They don't have to wait that full, almost calendar year to take it over again. Sorry, that's my time.
Thank you, Anthony. And last up is Stephanie Hansen.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Hansen. I live at 123 Valley Brook Drive, Bluegrass, Iowa. I'm here to talk about the potential closing of Bluegrass. I know that cuts have to be made in this district, and I know that money needs to be saved. But I'm concerned because of the community of Bluegrass. It continues to grow, and people continue to come out there. My husband and I chose to move out there because we want our kids to go to Bluegrass schools. It's a great school. It's one of the few in our district not on the SINA list. The school is in need of assistance. I just don't want these cuts to be made at the expense of our kids, such as cutting teachers or cutting classes or schools. We're a district of distinction, and I think to keep it that way, we need to keep these schools open. We're all here for the kids. And if we close a school, we'd be cramming those students into already brimming full classes. And from my experience in the classroom, class sizes that are that big, it's not very quality education. Finally, I don't know exactly how much money it would save. I've heard countless parents and sadly say that they'll take their kids to other districts or to private schools, and we'd lose more kids, and then later on there would be more cuts to our budget. So I urge you to please make the cuts that would least affect our kids and the quality of their education. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Open forum is really important to the board, and it's important that all of you express your ideas, your thoughts, and this it does help the board as it considers all these. And I want to especially thank all of you that participated this evening: Melissa, Hunter, Julie, Brinson, Vince, Tammy, Patrick, Alex, Anthony, and Stephanie. Thank you again for giving us your thoughts. So we're going to get right into a discussion about the budget, and the superintendent is going to lead that discussion. And after that, we will continue with the rest of our regular meeting, and we will resume after that discussion with the consent agenda. Superintendent Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board, I direct your attention to the information I provided you, Superintendent's draft general fund budget reduction plan. To remind everybody, we've been talking about this budget since we closed out last year's budget, so it was last spring. This is certainly not normal, mainly since you don't have to make the approval till about the 15th of April. We would start talking about it perhaps January or February. But you asked that we have an open, transparent discussion right away. So beginning at that time, I brought you some ideas about ways that we could reduce the budget. You provided me some information and thoughts about things to be considered. We researched those and got those back to you. So what I'm going to present tonight is a 3-year plan based on the things we've been talking about for several months. For a couple of years, we've talked about how much do we need in our unspent balance authority, and that's our reserve. And the state says about $500 per student, and we have several times talked about and put a stake in the ground for $8 million. So I want you to know that is the goal that I worked on with the Chief Financial Officer when we began working on the budget plan. We also have the assumption that we'll get at least a 3% supplemental aid from the state. That used to be allowable growth for the next 3 years. Now, it could be more, as we know. It could be less, but for assumptions, we're using a 3%. We are saying that we'll lose about 75 students per year for the next 3 years. It could be less, could be more. We have gone up and down the last 3 years, but I'd like to use as a starting point an assumption that it would be 75 students per year and hope that it would be less. We do know the Affordable Care Act is going to cause us to have some increases in our budget. In fact, we have someone coming this month to talk to us about that. But Marcia has suggested we use a 5% increase to our health costs based on the Affordable Care Act. My philosophical approach, and again, now as I turn this over to you, you'll begin to come back to me with yours. I've done this for so many years that I don't like to think about it. $30 million in cuts, and I've never had to give out a pink slip or ask someone to leave a district that wanted employment. So I'm hoping we can continue to do that. I don't like pink slips because it's a threat, it's demoralizing, and it looks as though you really don't have a solid plan for where you're going. And I would like to think that everything that we plan to do, that again, we will preserve positions for people so no one will have to lose their job. I like to balance reductions so no particular segment of our employee force is inordinately affected. And as mentioned back before, remember administration, the plan that I put before you, if we have to do all this, the reduction in teacher positions would be about 3.8%. The reduction in administrative positions would be 10%. And as much as possible, keep the reductions away from student achievement, or do whatever we can to overcome any impact we might have. So based on that, we need to be looking at, again, depending on the fluctuation of state supplemental aid, between $3.5 million to $4.5 million a year. This is going to change each month that we talk. As the legislation meets, we'll begin to see, and hopefully quickly, where they're going. And I think that's one thing we all would like. We'd like 6%, 5%, 4%, but we'd like to know right away so that we can settle on our budget. So here is the first year of the draft plan for year 15 and 16. We would institute an early retirement. We have enough experience in the past to have a good estimate, and we'd expect that to come in about $1.5 million. We would reduce 15 teacher positions at high school, 6 at intermediate, and 4 at elementary school. And I'd like for our executive director to talk a little bit about how that would look and what impact that it might have. So, Mr. Scott and then Mr. Schnaden.
Start out at the high school level. We currently staff our high schools on an average of 26 kids per classrooms. We know that we do have classrooms that are up to 30 at this time, but we also know we have classes that we support that are 12 to 14 kids. So it would be the mission of the associate principal or the master scheduler of each building to be able to use those fewer teachers but still offer the same classes. I don't see a reduction in what classes would be offered, but I do see a reduction in the amount of classes. If you're going to have 10 sections of a science class, now you're going to have 9. And so you're going to have 2 extra kids in a classroom. At the middle school level, it would be similar. It may be middle school, some of the smaller classes, a teacher may have to teach an extra prep, potentially, but within their means they have some classes that are smaller this time. And again, it's going to fall on the administrative to work on the staffing, and so that we are not reducing classes that are being offered at either level.
The only comment I'd make about elementary was we looked at 4 positions there across the 18 elementaries, which would most likely could have an impact on a balanced enrollment. We have disproportionate class sizes across the district, some that are at capacity, if you will, and some as low as maybe 15 students in a class. So it would be an opportunity to bring kids in to balance those classrooms or to find 4 reductions across the 18 elementary schools.
Thank you. And what I'd like to do is try to go through all these and then certainly go back and answer your questions. And decide where to go from this point. For the 5th year in a row, maybe the 6th year, we would ask for the departments, not the schools, to reduce their budgets by 5%. We're going to have in each of 3 years at least one administrative reduction, and I've given you notes all the way back on the last page. We've identified positions of administration that would be reduced. A school principal by combining school leadership, a high school associate position, one ASC administrative position, and a curriculum department position. And the reason that I have been nonspecific, we would fill these by attrition, and we know that certainly at least some administrator is going to leave each year, and then when that person does, we decide exactly how to do the fill with finding one of these vacancies. So again, there's going to be some pushing and pulling, and I can't tell you exactly how it would work right now, but these would be the positions that we'd aim to reduce in the long run. And as well as if we repurpose any schools, and those principal positions, and if they're associates in the schools, would also be lost. So that's why I'm non-specific, and I have at least one per year, and it could be that there might be two, or it might happen all in 1 year. The elimination of the administrator annuity for new hires. Administrators now have an annuity, and this would mean any new hires that came in would not. And that would, again, we're guessing at the new hires we'd have each year would save about $40,000. We'd eliminate 2 instructional coaching positions and 1 reading interventionist position. These are extremely important positions, and we hope and think that our teacher leadership support mechanism will assist us to overcome these losses. Utility savings, I have a utility savings committee which is working to save utility costs even this year, and I think that we can continue that into the out years also. We'd curtail professional development to reduce need for substitutes, and that would save about $190,000. Now we have a lot of our professional development paid by categorical grants, but these are ones that are paid out of the general fund. So we would just have a moratorium on professional development. We don't see that as all bad. We have really been pushing professional development for a few years now, and maybe just settle back, let the teachers teach, and see how things go and save on our substitutes. So that would be year 1 for a possible savings of about $3.8 million for the first year. Now all those savings are sustainable, so they would flow over into the next year, and so I'm showing the draft for years 16 and 17. And again, another early retirement opportunity, but there'd be less. You can't continue to go to that well at the same amount, but we think that our estimate of $750,000 would be doable. And again, eliminate administrator annuity for new hires, change from block to traditional schedule. So we have not taken that off. If we need to reach an amount which is 3.5 to 4.5 in any given year. And in this year we have repurpose a school. Now in note number 2 it says that the board would appoint a committee beginning now to look into the possibility of repurposing a school and to make a recommendation of which school or schools. So that would be an absolutely long process. The board does have a policy which indicates the things that must be considered when repurposing a school, and that committee could begin work right away. It'd be transparent. People would know which schools are being recommended, and it would have to be based on data and impact. Reduce 3 instructional coach or interventionist positions. Going back to utility savings again. Looking at increasing the transportation walk zones. We've looked at those for several years, and we decided that we would put that last on our priority for several years, and there's a time when if you still have to reduce that, we may have to bring that back. We have a requirement to go 1,080 hours during the school year. Right now that's about 6.5 hours per day. If you increase that to 7 hours, 7.5, or 8 hours per day, then you could in fact knock off a number of school days. In which case, just thinking out loud, that maybe your holiday break in December, January would be longer, maybe your spring break would be a little bit longer, you come back to school later. But the savings for that is about $25,000 per day in utilities and transportation, and that's very conservative. So I leave that out there as to make up the difference if we have to do that. Again, another administrative position through attrition, and the potential savings is $3.3 million without considering how many days you could reduce the school year at $25,000 per day. And then in year 3, it becomes harder and harder, and I would hope that something would have happened by then. Either enrollment would have an upsurge, or we would be the beneficiary of some of the funds that we know are in the state coffers, but we would look at another early retirement. The administrative annuity, again, with eliminating those, and it'd be $40,000. Repurpose another school. Utility savings would be less because, again, there's going to be a time when you are very, very efficient and you really can't do any more in that area. And then class size increases. Again, we would try to minimize those and have the least possible impact. But in order, our savings are in people, once it's more than 80% of our budget. So we're going to have to continue to look at that, and then administrator position or positions. And those savings in that last year are $2.3 million. But when we get past 15-16 and we look at 16-17, we're going to have to begin to look again very carefully 2 years out and see how we're going to do that. So that is my structure that I'd like the board to consider. I know the agenda committee has talked about having the next budget discussion on the last meeting in November, and then continue after that, so we have this probably each month in front of the board and the public, and we just continue to get other ideas, research other ideas, and try to see our direction for certainly next year, but realizing that we have the same issue for at least another 2 years.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. And to clarify the agenda committee's thinking relative to having another meeting on the budget on November 24th is that if there's thinking of making the decision to change from block to traditional, that should be made in the month of November so that everything can be prepared for the following year. Of course, you note that in the superintendent's plan, he didn't put it in for this year, but we'll probably still have that discussion on November 24th. I'll open it up for discussion. Director Sherwood.
A couple of things. First, I want to speak a little bit about closing schools. I don't know how rumors get started, but it's unfortunate when they do. To my knowledge, there's been no conversation by this board or anybody that I've had a conversation with about closing Bluegrass schools. So I don't know where that came from, but it should be about Bluegrass School. I don't think so, but about closing schools, absolutely. That's not off the table. But about a particular school, as far as I know, that has not occurred. And the other thing that happens is people do make choices about where they're going to school, and the likelihood that someone might choose a different path if they think their school's in jeopardy, there's not a solid future there, is very real. So by these rumors, we run the risk of stimulating an outflow from the district for no good reason. So just so that folks are aware of that. I would like to speak a little bit about some things that aren't on the list. Can we do that?
I think we can. I'm not, I guess as long as it is consistent with the discussion of this budget reduction plan.
Sure. Well, I'll talk to a couple of things first. Repurpose and closing is the same thing. Is that correct?
Well, repurposing means that you're making a conscious decision that you're not going to sell it, you're not going to board it. There's going to be something that goes in there, and that's
Okay.
a little bit different than, to me, a frame of mind of closing. It doesn't matter what happens, we just aren't going to have it.
Okay, so you've used repurposing in one year and closing in 2 others.
No, I didn't mean to. In fact, on mine, I've changed. It should be repurposed in every case.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So that and increasing the hours of day, are there any contractual issues with that, with the teachers teaching longer?
Oh, there surely may be. Absolutely. I would think so. They'd want to talk about that's changing the way that we operate and their working conditions.
Right. So, and the union, you've had preliminary discussions with them about this?
I have not.
Okay. The other thing I want to bring up, I understand that special ed chairs at the high schools have no teaching duties. That they, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct. And so one of the recommendations that I've heard from teachers is that we look at those positions. And I would say that, and I would say this, and I don't mean to demean what they do, because I know that IEPs are no fun, and it takes a mountain of work to get those things done, and the law changes every year, and it makes it difficult. But we didn't have specialists like that at the Kimberly Center, and I can't imagine a higher concentration of IEPs than the Kimberly Center. So how is it that the Kimberly Center was able to get along without that position being full-time, and the high schools are not?
I know that those positions are not out of the general fund. They come out of our special ed fund dollars. So it wouldn't impact this right here.
It would not?
It would not.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I've got right now.
I want to clarify something. I too wondered where in the world some of this was coming from, but back in September there was a document that used as example only. It used 3 schools, and it was from the superintendent to the board, and it used these as examples. Bluegrass happened to be one of the examples as a what if, then you could potentially save this amount of money. And I think that's probably what really bothered a lot of the people at Bluegrass. The other 2, I think, I think JB was on there, and I don't remember and Washington. Okay, but they were examples only, and I intended to try and clarify that also in the beginning.
I appreciate that.
Yep. Any other discussion? Director Snyder.
I too have a question on budget as far as block versus traditional in regards to what Mr. Sherwood had also alluded to in regards to teacher contracts. As far as going from block to traditional, they would be adding workload. So I would assume that there would be some changes that would need to be made to contracts. So I don't even know how that would play out or even allow us to do that. So I'd be curious as to what that would look like.
That probably would not be a contract issue. It would be a practice issue, and we do have some grievances that we've worked with in the past, and we're still working to make sure that we have, from our lawyer, a clear field to go forward with that, and we wouldn't bring that back until we did. But we don't think it's contract, but there is past practice that we certainly would have to work with.
Any other discussion? Director Dickman.
I made little notes as we went along here. The reducing teacher positions obviously is difficult. That is almost certain to increase class size. I do think that at the elementary level that would create a lot of hardship just because elementary school students tend to be more rowdy. Also, the eliminating the administrator annuity only for new hires. I also think that taking money out of someone's paycheck is not an ideal way to go. But when we're looking at these kind of budget cuts, administrators are already doing as well as anyone else in this district. And the annuity, as my understanding, is not part of their take-home. We budget this kind of pay. And so I think that eliminating that, while it wouldn't be the nicest thing, That's the kind of things that we're looking at. We're talking about eliminating instructional coach positions. What about sports coaching positions? I know that that's something that I had asked about in previous budget discussions. And I know that that's not a huge part of the budget, but if we can get those to be filled by volunteers, that would save us some money.
Anything else? Director Clue.
In the 2015-16 year, we've projected early retirement for $1,500,000. How many employees would you anticipate?
We estimate that would be between 60 and 70.
Feel that's a pretty fair estimate based on...
That's actually lower than the last time that we offered the incentive, and since it's been a couple of years, we feel pretty comfortable with that number.
Well, at this point, this is new for board members as well as it is for the general public. I appreciate the administration's effort to lay this out over 3 years. I think 2 years would have been too drastic. I think we have to make this 3 years to reach our $8 million budget estimate, our hope to reach our unspent balance authority. So at this point, I think that we have all talked about many of these issues over the last several months. I think that administration has done a good job in coming forward with listening to different groups of people, listening to board members, and I think for an initial layout, I think it's appropriate given the conditions that we have. Certainly, the Legislative Advocacy Committee is going to continue to work with our legislators to try to reach a reasonable level of allowable growth. I mean, for heaven's sakes, if we were to achieve a national average, it would take 16% allowable growth. That's just to be at the national average. So we certainly have good reason to continue to work with our legislators to receive a reasonable amount of funding to do the kinds of things that we're doing. So I want to spend some time with this, listen to what people have to say, but I appreciate the efforts.
Director Defoe.
I would like some clarity on the certified enrollment number. We were given an early number that was the 220, then a report back that it may be 160, and then last I've read it's 220 again, so.
I apologize, but it's 220. Okay. And I'm not sure the 160, but it is 220, yes.
Okay. And I appreciate that. In looking at the proposed cuts, there are some that are more readily acceptable in my mind. The early retirement incentive I do think is an appropriate incentive to pursue. The reductions in administration by attrition I would be supportive of. The earlier recommendations where we would simply eliminate an assistant principal position was not very tenable to me because it would make a significant impact to a very limited number of personnel. But doing that through attrition I would think would be appropriate. I appreciated the clarity of what repurposing a school was because I wasn't certain versus closing, which it is a synonym in my mind. I would support the elimination of the annuities for new hires. I think that, again, is appropriate. A couple things that were discussed in prior years that we haven't given attention to. One was going to a 4-day work week during the summer, which would eliminate approximately 16 to 20 work days, roughly. So that the ASC, other, off buildings would not be open, and what type of accrued savings would we have if we moved to a 4-day work week during the summer?
For utilities, is that?
Just in general, if you know, staff, if that was a furlough day, you know, and whether we staggered furlough days so that, but we went to a 4-day work week.
Okay.
Again, during the summer where utility prices typically are the highest. Mr. Sherwood has spoken several times about whether or not it might behoove us to look at a K-8 model for some other buildings that are in proximity to one another, and whether or not there may be some cost savings associated with that, and whether in fact that may be a more appropriate delivery model for instruction. So I would like to have a little more conversation about that. Obviously not something that we could do this year, but in looking at years 2 and 3, especially as we're repurposing buildings, that may be one way in which to do that. In looking at the reduction of teacher positions in the next year, I had noted early on, how do we do this without increasing class size? Yeah, and I do think it's obvious, at least for the high school, we are talking about a modest increase or potential of a modest increase. It also sounds as if we will be losing perhaps some courses that have a limited number of students participating in them, correct?
At first look, I would say we're not looking to eliminate any of the courses. We're looking at it as it may not be offered twice during the year, maybe just offered one time. And we have to share from building to building, we would, but internally I'm not looking to eliminate any of the courses. We really don't have that many that are at a really extreme low number that I'm nervous about right now, but I know the student selections for next year could be different than this year.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. One thing I am concerned about, though, and I think for those 10-section courses, it's less impactful, but when you have 2 sections and you're trimming to 1, and you have other courses that, again, are only slated into 1 or 2 instructional time periods, it makes it much more complicated for a student to access those courses.
I agree totally.
And that would be of concern to me. In regard to block versus traditional schedule, what I really would like to do is to carve out some time to have that conversation completely separate from this larger overall conversation. Soon, but I would like us to be able to just really delve into that, the pros, the cons, people's opinions, so that we can put it to rest. And so I would ask the agenda committee to consider that, and I could fill out a board request form if needed. In terms of the increasing transportation walk zones, that's something we have talked about, and we never seem to have the wherewithal to make that decision. Something that I had thought about relative to transportation, because we've talked a lot about transportation and how that walk zone impacts students accessing school. We already work with the city collaboratively to offer bus passes to any student with a Davenport Schools ID. And I'm wondering if for families that did not have personal transportation, if we could work with the city so that a parent or guardian could also get a bus pass so that they could ride the bus with their student to school, because I would assume that parents of elementary students would be apprehensive, I would be apprehensive to put my 8-year-old student on a bus and say, see you at 3:30. But if I as a parent could ride to school with them and get home, and if there was a lag in time, perhaps we would have an interventionist or some family opportunities available at the beginning of the day so the parents would feel welcome and could get some information or other resources from the school, which I'm thinking more along the lines of the Monroe presentation that we had. I mean, I think it'd be a good opportunity to do something that would be beneficial to our parents, address the impact of poverty that we talk about in terms of our priorities, engage families, and perhaps save some resources. And given the fact that we only in the last 7 or 8 years reinstated curriculum specialists so that we could have curriculum alignment throughout our buildings, losing those positions, that would be one of my last cuts that I would be interested in looking at.
Director DeFau, just for my clarification, when you talked about having a discussion on block versus traditional scheduling, can you suggest to me what time frame you're thinking that would occur?
Well, if we need to know by the end of November if that's something that we want to keep active as a budget item, then I think that it would need to occur within that time frame.
Okay, thank you. Director Sherwood.
Yeah, couple of things. The block thing, the block schedule. The DEA still contends that you're aware of the arbitration awards that went against the district. The district lost in arbitration, saying that we could extend the high school teachers to 6 classes from 5, and the district lost that. The DEA's contention is that that still controls. That if we go beyond the 5 on a regular schedule, we're going to have to compensate for that, which means we have no savings for changing that schedule. Your position is that they no longer control?
No, my position, what I said was, it's not a contract issue, but it is the arbitration issue. We have a contrary legal opinion, but I'm trying to tie that down very specifically because I need to come to you, if we go ahead with that and say, legally, in fact, I might even have the lawyer come, here's what his opinion is, so.
Yeah, I'm sure this will be litigated,
right?
Whatever happens. Okay.
Okay.
I have not seen a proposal here, which I thought I might. We have a number of paired schools. We have Washington Sudlow. We've got Adams Williams. We've got so forth. We've got 4 or 5 of these paired schools. Have we thought at all about unifying the administration for those?
Yes, we have, and it's back on my note 1 school principal by combining school leadership positions.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that might be a doable thing. The other thing with high school associates, a large part of their day is spent in disciplinary issues. And so that when we had deans in place, those deans did the same kind of thing. Now, those associates can evaluate, which the deans can't. But if those deans took on a bigger load of the work on disciplinary issues, and if we made some progress in our district-wide disciplinary philosophies and practices, we may not hurt ourselves too badly by looking at a cut in one administrative position and reducing that to a dean position. Have you considered those?
Well, again, reducing an associate position is on the list, and we just have to wait. We're going to do it by attrition, so it's a matter of which administrator leaves first, and how we going to.
Would that be replaced by a dean or just left empty?
Well, some people talked about a SAM, so I haven't made that decision yet. If you replace by a dean, it's not a full saving for the whole position. So.
I understand, but it may minimize
yes, we've
the
thought
impact.
About that.
Yeah, okay, good.
But again, the complicating factor there is making the evaluations of the teachers. There's just so many in a school.
And ultimately, I agree that there is, in my mind, there's going to have to be a school closing, perhaps 2, to get the long-term savings we're talking about. Because, as you point out, the early retirement thing is diminishing returns. That's not going to be a long-term savings. There's a number of these things. And so my sense is, and the way like you have your principles, my principle about closing schools is the minimum impact on the neighborhood school, the community that's surrounding it. And so schools that are standalone schools that the community, it's the only game in town or the game in the neighborhood, would be my second choices. But places where we have schools paired right now, again, we have a number of intermediates paired with elementaries. There, I think you have the potential, if you go to a K-8, of minimizing the impact to the neighborhoods and at the same time achieving some savings. So with that in mind, with the possibility of that in mind, that there may, and that would entail some construction issues, resizing schools and so forth. I think that at some point in the very near future, we're going to have a discussion about rethinking our long-term plan in light of what we're talking about in these budget cuts. If we start putting a bunch of dough into a school that ends up being closed, it makes us look ridiculous, and in fact, I would feel ridiculous doing that. So getting our cart before the horse is not a good idea. If we can reverse that sequence, I'd feel much better about it. But I do think that we need to take close looks at how we would be able to unify those schools that would minimize the impact on kids in the neighborhoods and the neighborhoods in general. As far as walk zones, we're having discussions in the Poverty Committee right now about the impact of transportation on poor families. Poor families and families that are not motivated to get their kids to school, that's an issue the further out they get away from the school. I personally would not let my kindergartner walk 1.5 miles. I wouldn't do that without walking with him myself. But we do have some solutions we're working on. We're looking at, I think that Madison has a walking school bus in place. I want to find out about that. That's a thing that happens in a lot of cities. There's a possibility that we can better utilize our own transportation system where buses are running partially empty on those outer perimeters of these walk zones. We might be able to find ways to allow kids to use some of that as long as seats are available. We need to take a closer look at that before we think about extending a walk zone that will impact especially low-income kids. SAMs. The discussion has been made, the same point you made about reducing coaches and reading specialists, about the presence of master teachers in these buildings. That same argument has been made about SAMs, that with the presence of these highly skilled teachers in building to do educational coaching, there's less need for the principal to be an instructional coach, and so the principals might be retasked to achieve more of those administrative tasks and to eliminate SAMs. Has that discussion taken place?
No, and I would never see the principal not being the instructional leader of the school. I've talked to the principals about that.
Yeah.
And I would always see them being the guiding light of instruction in their school. So that's the way I feel about it.
No, I understand, but you think they need to be in this classroom as much as they do with these master teachers?
I do, because the leaders in the school, the teacher leaders, are not the disciplinarians. They're not the one that can really give guidance that I expect to see. They really are to help and support. So we need to be very careful to keep those two roles apart. And the principal and I have talked about that, again, the teacher leaders are there as help, mentors, and they need to be seen that way. So we need to be very careful that we keep those roles separate.
All right. I don't disagree with that. And along that same point about roles, I don't like two-tier wage systems. I don't like it in industry. I don't like it any place. When a person is doing the same job as the next person and is being paid differently, that creates a lot of hard feelings and a lot of discord. So that when we're talking about eliminating the supplemental for administrators, the new hires, we're talking about creating a two-tiered wage system for administrators. And that, to me, is just a recipe for a lot of problems. I would much rather see us roll back a few percentage points on the current administrator's annuity and then give a smaller annuity to new hires so that there's a smaller gap between those things. But if we continue the annuity where it is now and new hires come in, that's a significant difference in pay for these administrators. And I would be resentful if I'm working my butt off and see the next guy, even if he's working as hard as I am, he's still making a whole lot more dough for doing the same job, and it just isn't a good thing. So if we could find a way to nuance this a little bit, I think that'd be a good idea.
Director Dickman?
If we are having a separate discussion about block versus traditional, I would also like to include in that discussion a modified block where we split one of the blocks into two skinnies, whether or not we use that as a potential cost savings, because there are classes that have been brought up, like languages, physical education, and math, that could benefit from the traditional scheduling. Also, the idea in the second year of increasing the school hours per day and decreasing the number of days attending, that intrigues me as something that could potentially work for cost savings. If we could do further investigation to make sure that that wouldn't have a negative impact on student achievement. And then just to clarify, the instructional coaches and math coaches, I feel rather strongly that we should not cut those positions. I think that is how we are helping the kids that most need help. The orchids that Dana, it's the director always talking about that some kids will bloom wherever you put them, and some kids will only bloom when you give them just the conditions. And I think that those coaches create those conditions for those kids. And then just to touch on the walk zones, I'm also a little uncomfortable with increasing those walk zones. I think that goes against our priorities of mitigating the impacts of poverty, but I do like the ideas that some of the other directors have shared.
Excuse me, before I call on any other board members, I want to see if any student board members had anything to add right now. I'll ask you later. Sure, Olivia?
Something I was just thinking about was just another option of different styles of the scheduling is I know North Scott has like A and B days, so they have the block scheduling, but they also, it's sort of a mix between block and traditional because they have 8 classes, but they only have 4 per day, and so they switch off those classes every other day. And so that was just something when Director Dickman was talking, popped into my head.
Thank you. Bennett?
At North, I know we're already doing certain classes are A and B days during certain blocks. Not the entire schedule is an A, B day, but just during second block you might have gym A day and something else B day. And then for the walk zones, would it be possible to like maybe boost the walk zones in high school and middle schools where the kids are older and more responsible, and leave the smaller walk zones for the elementary schools?
All of these are good ideas, and just about anything is possible. So thank you for that thought. Any other student board members? Okay, try and catch my attention. I've been so focused on the board, and I apologize for that. Director Kluhl.
Well, Director Sherwood started off on the revival riff there on the walking school bus, and I was about ready to shout amen. And I'm still willing to do the walking school bus in my community with McKinley if they ever want to do it. But I'm thinking about all the things that we could do, ourselves, because legislators are always looking at us in terms of how you're leveraging your resources. So I think that walking school bus thing is an idea we've talked about and something that we might be able to do. Which brings up the part of the process that Dr. Tate started with when we started this discussion a couple of years ago, and that was the Resource Allocation Committee, providing the community an opportunity to input on some of these ideas. And I'm wondering, is that Resource Allocation Committee still functioning?
No, we had it for the first couple of years, and then we had picked all the low-hanging fruit, and they had really combed through every bit of our budget, so then we just relied on our forums and our public comments and for the ideas.
So you feel like we pretty much got the most we can get out of that committee?
I think so. For having a formal committee, we still want to hear from the public, and I'm hoping we will. They always come up with good ideas, but I don't see a formal committee helping us much more. That we're still using ideas that they dredged up at the time. Like I said, we combed through everything, so I just feel comfortable that we're going to hear from the public. We're starting in plenty of time. It's very open, very transparent, and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Director Snyder.
Just one more question or clarification in regards to the instructional coach positions and the reading interventionist positions. These positions are now somewhat duplicated with the TLC grant that we received, correct?
I'm not sure. I mean, the grant has just started, but no, they're not. In the TLC grant, we have teacher leaders, so their job is to help the principal with assisting teachers. We have mentors, and then we have model teachers, and that's sometimes a coach might go in and model, but the model classroom or people who go into the classroom to see the model teacher, he or she normally wouldn't go around. So at this point, no. In reality, some of the functions as we see it working might. That's why I'm saying there may be some room where we don't need all these positions. I mean, but I reluctantly put coaches on there. There's half a coach for each of our elementary schools and an interventionist for each. And again, I was reluctant in putting those down there.
Because I know a lot of these coaches are just recently placed, and if they are making an impact, I too would hate to step backwards on that.
Anybody else? Director DeFau.
Yes, just as a follow-up in terms of the reduction of teacher positions and increased class size conversation we were having, and with increased class size being an item in year 3, I'd like to see that moved up in the agenda in terms of consideration. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
I need to clarify, when you say moved up in the agenda, are you talking about the agenda that the board would discuss, or are you talking about the agenda of budget reduction?
I'm talking about in terms of budget reductions, that item appears in year 3. I would like us to have a conversation sooner than that, because if you're looking at other items and cutting instructional positions, I think that there's a give and take in terms of what is in the best interest of students. I guess and I've made this statement at the board table before, so I'll make it again. You know, when I was looking at my own students and their educational experience, my philosophy was give me another student in the classroom rather than reduce or eliminate the class that they want to take. My own personal opinion. You know.
Thank you. Katie.
I just remembered a quick question that I had about the change from block to traditional schedule. It says 1.1 million saved. Would that be just for the 2016 to 2017 school year, or do we know the long-term effects of that, how that would affect the budget or the cost of that?
Well, all of the items on all 3 years are sustainable. I mean, it goes year to year. Once we've cut them, we've actually changed our structure. And we've had some reductions in past years that wasn't so, where it was a one-time, but it helped us get through that year. But yes, it would go year to year to year. And if, for example, in this next year, the board decided, let's just take $4.5 million out, that would carry over each year as long as we didn't overspend.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anything else? Director Sherwood.
You got me too soon. Just a second. Oh, yeah, I just wanted to mention that there's something in here that just hints at it. You have $100,000 savings on utilities. How did you arrive at that number?
I don't know. I mean, we've said we're going to save $120,000 this year, so it really is just a round number, and we'll have to see how we do this year. We have a committee. We're making some changes. We're putting together some practices that are going to have to change in schools and classrooms. So we'll have to see how this year goes. So it's just my best guess. I've seen in past districts where we've done this, and we have been able to save considerable money. So.
Yeah, I was going to report on this later. I had spent last Friday with Mr. Maloney and a group of 6 folks from the city, the county, and the state looking at our grounds and water quality and management and that sort of thing. And those folks were all pretty enthusiastic about the idea that if we can get away from these high-maintenance bluegrass fescue lawns that we have literally hundreds of acres of and move over to natives, that we can save substantial maintenance costs there. The same thing's true if we even though payback on alternative energy may be not great, we can do the alternative energy from our capital budget and reap the savings from our operational budget. And it would behoove us to have an aggressive alternative energy program which would boost that savings that you're talking about quite a bit, along with the use of things like LEDs, and Mr. Maloney can speak to this much better than I can, but LEDs just in gymnasiums, replacing these giant lights we have two wonderful effects. One is they don't produce a lot of heat, so you don't have the increased temperatures in there. The second thing is that it cuts your cost of lighting those places by a factor of like 10, I think it is. So widespread introduction of LEDs throughout the district, the use of natives in our grounds, reducing our maintenance costs there. There are a lot of options there that we might have painless, and not only painless, but actually positive things environmentally that we could produce and sustain cuts. Those are kind of soft figures. It's hard to put a hard figure on those things, but we can't discount that. At the same time, we're talking about impacts that affect the classrooms. So some of these things, we're going to have to be a little bit patient about how they develop, I think. We have although we have to get real serious about these dramatic cuts, we still have to be able to kind of plant seeds and allow them to mature on these savings, I think.
Director Dickman.
Just a quick comment. I'd like to second that and make sure that we're looking at that if we reevaluate our long-range facilities plan to work that in, that kind of information, that kind of planning in.
Anything else? All right. Well, I've got a few things I'll just mention. It's interesting, I think, the discussion on walk zones, and especially when I think about our general philosophies on green and health, and a lot of things that are affected, and increasing the walk zone would be consistent with being greener, I think, and I think it would be consistent with promoting health. What I've heard this evening is I haven't heard that the board disagrees with the approach that the superintendent is taking, that it's a 3-year plan, not in priority order, but there's a general approach to resolving our budget issue that occurs over these 3 years. Sometime in the next period of time, and I don't know what period that's going to be, the board will more formally support the approach, and we have plenty of time. Our certified budget isn't due until April. But I think the board, especially with all of these things that it's asking for, probably really doesn't want to spend a lot of time discussing some of the particulars of the budget. What I have heard, though, is some discussions on the long-range plan, the class size, modified versus block versus traditional, the spending lost funds and gaining budget funds then to use as we need, which is an interesting approach. The repurposing schools will require establishing a committee in accordance with this. A couple of things that have come up kind of on the edges are our priorities and how some of these interface with those priorities. The legislature was mentioned at least once, and one of the things that I always think of, and our community may or may not be aware, but there's an inequity in per pupil spending across the state of Iowa. And this is something that our legislative advocacy committee tries, and it's tried for probably 5 or 6 years, to address this with our legislators. And what it means is we don't get to spend as much money as some of the other districts in the state. Basically, that equates to about $2 million per year that we don't get to spend. And that's part of what's affecting our budget issues. I just wanted you to all be aware of that. It still is a tough deal to deal with. Trying to work with our legislators, and there we have to work with legislators across the state. And that's a tough job, but we keep at it. And I wanted to thank our Legislative Advocacy Committee. They do a lot of good work with our legislators, and we do thank our legislators for what they do. This is just one little area that bugs me. And I want to keep it up there in terms of highlighting it. So with all of that, what I'm saying is that I recognize that the board has a lot of issues that it wants to discuss. Some of these are urgent, meaning within the next month. Some of them will not be so urgent, they'll be within the next months. And then there are other issues that we need to discuss besides some of these and how they affect the budget. There are also going to be additional thoughts that are given to us on both the block versus traditional and on perhaps other ideas for any additional changes or suggestions to our budget. But I want to make sure that I'm reading the board right, that in general, other than some of the individual things that you've expressed, you support the general approach and the general dollars that we're talking about, both in year one and for the the 3-year plan. Is there any discussion on that? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, with the proviso, and I agree with the proviso, though, that I think there are some things that are not on this list, and I just articulated some of those, that, I want to see how that impacts, and that will impact my judgment on this list.
And I appreciate that comment, and I'm sure there may be additional things that are considered. Any other thoughts on my impression of where the board is? All right, and there's no additional discussion by the board or by the student board members. All right, well, it feels almost like the meeting's done, but it isn't. So, thank you very much, Superintendent Tate, for the presentation, and the board and student board members for your participation. We will continue with our meeting. And I will be planning on taking a brief recess in about 15 minutes. We'll continue with the consent agenda. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Kluhl.
I move that the consent agenda be approved as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me one minute. I wanted to look at one thing. Do you have yours up?
I did have one question, Mr. President.
Was that Director Sherwood?
I did have a question about an item on the consent agenda.
Sure, go ahead.
I'd like to speak about the partnership agreements with preschool.
I don't think we can do that.
You're right, unless you pull it off. Can we pull it off?
You can pull it out.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a votable request. You can simply request to pull it out.
I'd like to request to pull out the partnership agreement for pick one.
For which?
Any of the group. I'm sorry. For how about positive parenting at Trinity? And I don't mean to pick on them, but that's just an example.
All right, we'll take that out. Oh, and actually, that's why I was looking at this. I'd like to pull out the request for the contract AEA 267 for discussion. So the consent agenda will include everything except the AEA 267 contract and
5.06.
5.06. Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion on the motion? I'm trying to think here of which we need to do. I think what we'll do, since they've been pulled out, we'll go ahead and accept the motion on the consent agenda, and we will vote on those two separate issues, or those two issues separately. Is there any other discussion on the consent agenda motion? Call for the vote. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. We'll move back to the 5.06 28E Partnership Agreement, Positive Parenting at Trinity Preschool. Director Sherwood.
Thank you. I just have a question. I don't know who's, is there anyone here to speak to this?
Well, Tammy Conrad is here.
Great. Thank you, Tammy. You're fairly new, so you may not know this, but reading the state code that when it came along with this, when it talks about these partnership agreements, and I mean, like I said, I don't mean to pick on Trinity. I'm talking about all the partnership agreements. It says that those funds should be used to supplement existing programs, not to replace existing programs. In other words, if a program has 100 kids and they're already functioning with 100 kids, that money is meant to bring them up to 150, let's say, in one of their sites. How do we know that, in fact, we're not replacing existing funds in these things?
That would take a little bit of research on our part. This all came about 5 years ago with the state and the statewide voluntary preschool program. You present a very good question, and that's something that I can look into to find answers.
I'd appreciate it. The language is very clear. And if we're just they're taking people off the hook financially for doing what they've already done, then we're not growing our 4-year-old preschools nearly at the rate that we could if they, in fact, were supplementing. So, and perhaps they are all supplementing. They might all be in compliance. But if they're not, as the dispersers of these funds, it seems to me that we have the monitoring responsibility as well. Is that correct?
Yes, we do have that piece, but I will speak to the fact that when this program came about, I could speak to probably 2 to 3 of them that are on the list that did not have existing preschool programs to the extent that they have.
That's a different issue.
Okay.
That's brand new, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'm talking about the existing programs, and I know a couple of these programs pretty intimately, and they before the money came, they were pretty well funded. So it wasn't like they were hurting. I want to make sure that these dollars are there to expand their services. I don't want to hurt them, but I also don't want to subsidize what they're already doing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other discussion on this item? Director Dickman.
This isn't necessarily this isn't again is not picking on Trinity, but I have concerns about having religious institutions taking state dollars to provide preschool. I'm sure that the teachers there are wonderful, and I'm sure that they're doing a great job engaging students in the learning that they are supposed to be doing. I'm just concerned that there's also a religious element going on with the state funding, and out of respect for the separation of church and state, which our founding fathers put very, very directly in the wording of the Constitution, that I don't feel that that those two should be mixing. So I will symbolically be voting no on the religious institutions, preschools. I realize that we're just a flow through and that these measures will pass otherwise, but I just want to register that as a concern of mine, and also that I realize that we do not have the capabilities yet, but I feel that it would be better to have these preschool classrooms and preschool experiences be in our own buildings with our own staff. So that the incoming students will be most familiar with where they will then be going to kindergarten, and will know it will be an even easier transition to start their learning experience in the formal education system.
Any other discussion on this item? Director Kluhl.
I'd just like to point out that that's a very good point, because you all in the front row are very familiar with church and state issues. The church and the state, we don't combine resources because the state doesn't support any religion. But the state does have a program, and I know that it was not so long ago that as the district is responsible for making sure that those programs are run in accordance with state code, there was an issue where there was some potential religious instruction going on, and that stopped right away because the funds are not allowed for that purpose, and it's our role in working with those parochial schools to make sure that they are quality preschool programs, and if that does occur, I know that it's nixed right off the top. And frankly, I again understand your concern, but I think this allowance for public schools and private schools to get all 4-year-olds into a preschool education program is pretty darn valuable, because we have not reached all 4-year-olds. We have a long ways to go. So I understand your concern, though. I definitely do.
Any additional discussion on this item? All right, I'm going to call for the vote on 5.06, the 28E Partnership Agreement, Positive Parenting at Trinity Preschool. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
No.
Director DeFau.
Yes. And
my vote is yes. The motion carries. The other item that was pulled out was 5.03, the AEA 267 contract for special education services. And I just want to say, when I read through the contract, what it sounded like, if I was reading it right, is that we're going to pay for everything if our students go there. And yet, my interpretation has been for the past few years, when people send, or when districts send students to a program in our district, that we weren't entitled to anything more than the billing tool dollars. Now, am I misinterpreting the contract?
No, you've read it correctly, and with that particular contract and with that particular organization, I have contacted them directly and indicated to them we are reviewing every contract that comes in for every student that's been placed in any program around the state. And I'm making personal contact with each of those agencies, informing them that we won't be paying them more than what the special ed tuition billing tool allows us to pay. The state has allowed the concession for additional billing practices with the administrative excesses that you're referring to in the contract up until next school year, but it doesn't mean that we're required to pay those excess costs. And so Marcia Tangen and I have been working closely with that and indicating that we are not required to pay above and beyond the special ed tuition billing tool. So I've been alerting each of the agencies who are indicating the excess costs in the contracts that we won't be paying above what we're to pay with the special ed tuition billing tool.
So is that notation somewhere here in this contract?
No, it's not noted in that contract. What I have is a email trail from the Assistant Director of Special Ed for AEA 267, in which he's conceded the fact that we won't be paying above and beyond the what the tuition bill allows us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other discussion on this item? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. Director Kluel.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
I'm just a little conflicted. I'm going to actually abstain from the vote, and it's because I am on the AEA board here. I don't know that there's necessarily a conflict, but I'd rather not take any chances there. So I'll abstain from the vote, and the motion passes. We'll move on to approval of bills.
Mr. President,
Director Kluel.
move that the board approve the following resolution for the adoption of bills. The resolution is as follows. Resolved that all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the Secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn in the Treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the period of 10/9/14 through 10/22/14. The exception of one bill payment number 321456, payable to 95% group in the amount of $27,205.98, and that was written to the wrong vendor.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Kluel.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Mitchell mentioning about the award from MIT to the Project Lead the Way engineering students. I want to also indicate that was one of 15 schools nationwide that got the grant. And part of the impetus when the students, and they spent the summer looking and doing some research, they found out about an average of 38 children die each year by being left in cars and dying of heat stroke. So think of how amazing this will be if, in fact, they're able to solve that and provide some sort of an item put on the wrist, or for dogs, too, or pets they're talking about. So this is just a great thing they're doing, and nice it's happening here in this district. The showcase is tomorrow, and this is for it's an ambassador's rally, but we expect a lot of officials from the school. The student demonstration starts 6:30 as indicated, and 7 p.m. With the presentation. On the 29th of this month, we're hosting Director Buck and also Linda Fandel, who is the Governor's Assistant for Education. They want to talk about the new teacher leadership and compensation system, just see how it's going and give us a little time to brag upon what we're doing. And that completes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. And we come to a point where it's convenient to take about a 6-minute recess before we get started again, and we'll start with other items requiring action. Start. All right, board members, let's go ahead and get the meeting started. Excuse me? No. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. So we're still missing one board member, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to get started anyway. So hopefully Director Snyder will join us before too long. All right. We'll move to other items requiring action. May I have a motion regarding approval of level 1 and 2 investigators for 2014 and 15?
Mr. President,
Director DeFau.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation and approve the district level 1 and 2 investigators as presented to serve for a 1-year period for 2014-15.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director DeFau?
Yes.
Director Dickman?
Yes.
Director Sherwood?
Yes.
Director Kluhl?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding appointment of District Medical Director for 2014 and 15?
Mr. President,
Director
I
Kluhl.
move that the board approve the appointment of Naomi C. Shaheli, MD, as the medical director for the Davenport Community School District for the 2014-15 school year for an annual fee of $6,300.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Mr. President?
Director, was it
What
Director
her-
Sherwood?
Can we know what her specialty is? I think the last one was a neurologist. I'm just wondering.
Does anybody remember? I think she may be general practitioner.
GP?
Do you know? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
She is a general practitioner. She works for Concentra, which is the company that we use for our workers' comp claims, and she also does our functional screenings for our custodial groups and the groups that we have functional screenings for. Basically, as the medical director, she serves as a resource for our head nurse, which is Joan Judding. There are a series, well, the nurses have a manual that's probably about 4 to 6 inches deep that has standing orders in it, as well as standing orders for emergency situations, and they deal with the procedures that should be followed, from everything from a simple cut to burns to choking to severe chest pains. And Joan works with the medical director every year to review those procedures and make sure that they're up to date and accurate, and then in the hands of our nurses for any
No,
situations.
I appreciate that. I'm just a little more comfortable with the GP than I was with the neurologist.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Sorry.
Any other discussion? Call for the vote. Director Kluhl?
Yes.
Director DeFau?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Dickman?
Yes.
Director Sherwood?
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion for the approval of engineering services for security cameras at 13 elementary schools?
Mr. President,
Director Dickman?
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the contract for engineering and design services for the elementary school security camera systems to be awarded to KJWW Engineering in an amount not to exceed $105,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Dickman?
I'm just curious, I know that we've had to do a change order on previous security systems. Does this design firm have a better track record at finding all the nooks and crannies that that buildings might have, so we don't have to have a secondary installation?
Two things I think I should make clear: that some change orders were done because of the way that the entire process was structured, but the short answer to your question is yes. I'm very confident that we will have a better outcome with this firm providing these services.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I've got a question as I look at this, and I know that we don't have our changes to our contracts with architects, but it says here that KJWW are the engineers and SGGM are the architects as a sub-consultant to KJWW.
Yes, in this case, the preponderance of the work is electrical engineering, cabling, camera locations, and things like that. In a few locations, we'll be having to create a new data closet or do some architectural work finishes and so forth like that, and those are the services that SGGM would provide.
So let me ask, thinking back last spring on what happened with our other architect, if we go ahead and approve this, and something happened, and they said, well, here's the plan, but it's gonna, I don't know. we've already approved this amount for the cameras, but I'm just thinking, is the work product, I'm thinking about the drawings, that they must provide if they're engineers, they're doing drawings. And are those drawings going to be ours, or are they theirs?
We're going to use the language that Mr. Davidson provided in all of our AIA contracts going forward, and so that we will retain ownership of the work product.
Okay, great. And this is really just for the, gosh dang. This is just for the design, it's not, is it for the installation also?
It is not for the installation. The equipment is already under contract. There will be a contractor hired to pull the cables according to this design, install the switches and those kinds of things.
And that will be another bid, right, based on the designs that KJWW and SGGM provide, is that correct?
Exactly, yes, sir.
Do you have an idea what that's going to be?
I don't recall accurately. I could ask Mr. Page, he may.
Nah, I just wondered if you knew.
I'm thinking it was $400,000 or $500,000.
Yeah, I figured it'd be a bit. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, Director Sherwood?
Just since they're standing up there, Mr. Maloney, we had an issue, I don't know if it was a subcontractor or how it worked, but at the Mid-City, one of the, let's just say, poor performance on the part of the subcontractor. And I'm wondering what processes we have in place to put these guys on a no use list. How do we deal with this after we have these kinds of problems?
We have a process already in place. We have a number of vendors that are on a list of not to do business or not to do business with for a period of time. I'm gathering the documentation to submit to our procurement officer so that she can place this firm on a list of someone not to do business with, at least for some period of time.
Yeah, do we ever go after bonds or anything when they don't perform?
It is rare that we go after performance bonds. We usually hold retainage. There's another case we're working on where we've been holding $22,000 of retainage for a year after the work was done in order to get satisfaction from the contractor. Unrelated to tonight's discussion, but I think we have got there, and we'll be getting $15,000 from the contractor of that retainage to take care of those problems. So we use all the tools that are available in the contract to hold the contractor accountable for satisfactory completion of the work.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
No.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of change order for Triber Construction Mid-City Physical Activities Center?
Mr. President,
Director Sherwood.
I move that we accept the order for the change for Tribar Construction Mid-City Physical Activities Center as proposed by the administration.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding the 2080 partnership agreement with John F. Kennedy Preschool?
Mr. President,
Director DeFau.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation and approve the partnership agreement with John F. Kennedy Preschool in the amount of $224,192.66.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Kluhl.
I think just for the benefit of student school board members, Mayor Kinzer, and the rest that's left out there in the audience, an explanation of what this statewide voluntary program is about, this 28E agreement that we have with some 20 centers throughout the Scott County area. I'll read it. The statewide voluntary preschool program, which was, I think, written in 2008, provides funds to school districts in order to make preschool accessible by 4-year-old students in Iowa. To increase access to specifically Scott County 4-year-olds, a partnership was formed between the Davenport District and 20 partner sites. Funds are received on a yearly basis from the state of Iowa and then distributed to the villages and partner sites who provide preschool services. Davenport Schools is the governing body overseeing the partner sites. The contract was created to outline the various quality standards the partner sites are to comply with in order to be eligible for statewide voluntary preschool funding. Contracts are reviewed and renewed annually with partner sites. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we receive half of the per student amount for each of those children. Marcia's gone. I think that's correct. So just by way of information, it's a very, very important program in the state of Iowa.
Thank you. Is there any additional discussion? Director Sherwood.
Just a point that we have these agreements in 2 places. You might have noticed one is on the consent agenda and one's on the discussion agenda. That is based, as I understand it, on the amount of the contract. Is that correct? Yeah, just for clarification of why it's not as goofy as it looks. Okay.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Call for the vote. Director DeFau.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to, may I have a motion regarding 2080 partnership agreement with Trinity Lutheran Preschool?
Mr. President,
Director DeFau.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation and approve the partnership agreement with Trinity Lutheran Preschool in the amount of $208,623.73.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I'll call for the vote. Director DeFau.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
No.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Well, I tell you, I'm going to abstain again. I happen to be a member of Trinity Lutheran. But the motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to 2080 Partnership Agreement for All Saints Preschool. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Kluhl.
I move that the board approve administration's recommendation on the partnership agreement with All Saints Preschool in the amount of $177,485.86.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
No.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding 2080 Partnership Agreement with Community Action of Eastern Iowa Head Start Preschool?
Mr. President,
Director Dickman.
I move that the board approve the administration's recommendation for the partnership agreement with the Community Action Eastern Iowa Head Start Preschool in the amount of $124,551.48.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding the 28E Partnership Agreement with St. Paul Preschool?
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the partnership agreement with Community Action Eastern Iowa Head Start Preschool in the amount of $124,551.48.
Excuse me, is that the correct number?
That's what it says. Oh, am I on the...
We're on St. Paul.
Yeah, we're on St. Paul.
You have to click one down. St. Paul. You're on 809.
Okay. Sorry. Let's try this again.
Okay,
Mr.
try it
President,
again.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the partnership agreement with St. Paul Preschool in the amount of $121,437.69.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Oh, excuse me, Luke?
I was just curious, is this St. Paul Catholic or Lutheran? There are two St. Paul's with preschools.
Yeah, great point. I don't know the answer.
I believe it's Lutheran. I believe it's the one by Vanderveer.
Who's stating that? Oh, you do?
I believe it's the one by Vanderveer. Lutheran.
Okay, great. Thank you for the question, Luke. Katie, you were trying to get in also. Did you have a comment or question? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any additional discussion? We'll call for the vote. Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
No.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion for subject 8.10 for the 2080 partnership agreement with the YMCA Palmer Learning Center Preschool?
Mr. President,
Director Dickman.
I move the administration's recommendation that the board approve the partnership agreement with the YMCA Palmer Learning Center Preschool in the amount of $112,096.33.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Move to subject 8.11, 2080 partnership agreement with the Friendly House Preschool. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Kluhl.
I move that the board approve the partnership agreement with Friendly House Preschool in the amount of $108,982.54.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Sherwood. Director DeFow.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Move to subject 8.12, 28E partnership agreement with Growing Tree Preschool. May I have a motion?
Mr. President.
Did you say?
Yeah, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Thanks. Director Dickman.
Administration recommends, I move the administration's recommendation that the board approve the partnership agreement with Growing Tree Preschool in the amount of $102,754.97.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to subject 8.13, 2080 partnership agreement with Noah's Ark Preschool. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director DeFow.
I move the board accept the administration's recommendation and approve the partnership agreement with Noah's Ark Preschool in the amount of $93,413.61.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director DeFow.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
No.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Subject 8.14, 2080 partnership agreement with St. Ambrose Children's Campus Preschool. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Sherwood.
I move the administration's recommendation to the board to approve the partnership agreement with St. Ambrose Children's Campus Preschool in the amount of $65,389.53.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
No.
Director DeFow.
As an employee of St. Ambrose University, I'm abstaining.
And I will vote yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to subject 8.15, 2080 partnership agreement with Calvary Preschool. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Dickman.
I move the administration's recommendation that the board approve the partnership agreement with Calvary Preschool in the amount of $62,275.74.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Subject 8.16, 2080 partnership agreement with St. Alphonsus Early Learning Preschool. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board accept administration's recommendation to approve the partnership agreement with St. Alphonsus Early Learning Preschool in the amount of $56,048.17.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
No.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Looks like we're into policy. If I didn't miss something.
It's an action item.
Excuse me?
It's an action.
Yeah,
item.
that's what it looks like. So I'll go ahead and ask for a motion regarding policy.
Mr. President,
Director DeFau.
I move that the board accept the policy committee's recommendation and approve the following policies that were discussed at the 10/13/14 board meeting. 605.10, multicultural and gender fair approaches to the educational programming. 603.05, religious-based excuse from school program or activity. 605.02, testing program. 103.15, tobacco-free environment. 504.01, discipline policy. 504.03, search and seizure. 504.04, substance abuse.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Kluhl.
Just just reviewing the first, I believe it's the first policy here.
Darn it.
Yeah, multicultural and gender fair.
Yes.
And I was just looking at the last paragraph. I was looking at Dr. Goldstone, Director of Equity and Student Support, Davenport School Achievement Service Center, da-da-da-da-da. Contact her there or by telephoning 319-336-3805. Oh, okay. Is that correct?
The phone number,
319?
I can only defer to the
I
person.
suspect that's 563.
That's wrong.
Unless it's a cell phone number, and cell phone numbers can have any variety of area codes.
I think that's a district telephone number 336.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't pay attention. We can approve it noting the change, or, I mean, I don't know if it warrants pulling the policy for an area code. I mean, we could approve it with the understanding that the area code will be checked and corrected if needed.
Fine with
but
that.
good catch.
Yeah, that's fine.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director DeFau.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Move on to discussion items. We've already discussed budget. We'll move to 9.02, Literacy Series Number 1, Reading Data Review.
Okay, wake up and come forward. We've decided to start putting reading and literacy on our meetings and committees of the whole. So this is what we're calling Literacy Series number 1, and thank you for being here and enlightening us.
Great. I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about our literacy series and what we're going to be doing. Tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about how we collect and analyze data, and then at subsequent meetings, we'll be bringing some data to you that's fresh off the presses so that we can analyze those together. I have with me tonight Tara Parrish, who's our data specialist for the district, and then Beth Evans, who is our elementary and secondary reading and specialist, and also doing a lot of staff development in the area of letters and 95% group. We're going to begin this conversation this evening by going over what I refer to as Chapter 62, and that's the Department of Education's rules and regs for Iowa Code 281.62. And that's a piece of legislation that's going to have a tremendous impact on schools in Iowa. So as we start this evening, we're going to begin with an overview. And what Chapter 62 does is really promote effective, evidence-based programming, instruction, and assessment for all Iowa schools that will support all students to become proficient readers by the end of 3rd grade. While we can really give you an overview of what this is about, as the Department of Education continues to work on guidance for districts, there'll be many updates. There's a lot of questions right now about this, but as they become available, we're synthesizing that information to make sure that we implement this in good time. So the first area that we'll be reviewing is universal screening, and we're going to kind of tag team and go over this with you.
All right, so currently what the guidance is telling us is that universal screenings, we need to be screening all students, K-3, 3 times a year using a state-approved universal screening tool. And so they have provided a list of state-approved universal screening tools. And we also need to report our assessment data, K-3, to the state. We'll be uploading that into their tier system. So currently we're not using the system that directly puts the data in there, but we will upload it to their system. So currently we have universal screeners, and we have a way to give them our data.
When the data is reported to the state, the students are categorized in 3 ways. They're either meeting benchmark, or they're in the category of at risk or substantially deficient. If a student is categorized as at risk, that means that they had 1 benchmark screening period where they fell below benchmark. So those students then need to be monitored for their progress to make sure we can get them to benchmark before the next screening period. Students are then, if they have 2 benchmarks simultaneously or consecutively where they fall below benchmark, then they're considered substantially deficient. So those students will have additional instruction and progress monitoring to bring them back to benchmark.
Okay, intensive instruction. So the state is saying that there needs to be a minimum of 90 minutes per day of scientific, research-based reading instruction, and it's required for all students who are considered substantially deficient, which is what Tara just explained. And this instruction should include small group instruction, reduced student-teacher ratios, more frequent progress monitoring, tutoring or mentoring, extended time, or it could even include a summer reading program. Oh, that goes right into me. Okay, so the progress monitoring, that was just actually mentioned in the intensive instruction. Universal screening is 3 times a year. For students who are meeting benchmark, that's all that is required. For students who are at risk, they are at risk and substantially deficient, there is a requirement for weekly progress monitoring.
Teachers in Davenport have been doing RTI plans for a few years now, and part of that they've been contacting parents. We haven't had one streamlined way that they contact parents. It's up to each school, but they have been required to contact them if they have a student who needs intensive intervention. Now the state is going to require that they contact parents through, in writing, and they will have a parent contract as well. So annually, parents will need to be contacted to let them know that their child is substantially deficient in reading. They'll need to let them know what services are currently being provided, as well as additional services, so their core instruction and then their interventions being provided, and also some things that they can work on at home with their child. IowaReadingResearch.org is helping to provide lots of resources and some sample letters so that we can get those out to parents, and there will be more information about what that parent contract piece needs to look like. A lot of talk about what the current title contract for those families looks like, but adding more of the literacy piece to it.
Patty Pace Tracy and Shari Keel are here this evening also from our special education department. And we know that we've had a long-standing summer reading program here in Davenport. The difference is going to be the number of students that will be participating, and this will include all students. So any student that is considered to be at risk will have an opportunity to attend a summer reading program that will be intensive in nature. This will not happen officially with Chapter 62 until the summer of 2017, but we have a summer reading program in place, and we'll be ramping that up over the next few years so that by the time it does become the law, that we'll be well ahead of what the state's expectations are. And then finally, the major component of this that's really going to impact our students is that there's a retention component, that any third grader who is not proficient in reading by the end of third grade on our universal screening tool would be retained. Now, there's many good cause exemptions that are included in this law. Some of them are included that the student could demonstrate mastery through a portfolio if they'd been previously retained. There's a lot of exemptions included, but at this point, the key thing that we need to inform our teachers and our parents of is that there is a third grade retention component to this law. We also know that the students that are currently in first grade are the ones that will be our first students impacted by this. So we want to begin our work in earnest right now to make sure that all of the things that we have in place are all ramped up, and that if there's any components of this law that we don't quite have yet, that we get those in so that we aren't looking at retaining students in third grade. So now we're going to go on to some of what we do with data and how we collect and analyze it.
Okay, so you heard about the state's requirement.
Excuse me, Beth. Director Sherwood.
A few questions. This code change is already in effect, is that correct?
Yes, there are components of it that are already to be in place as of August of this school year,
Or this past last year?
the August that we just started.
The last legislative session. Couple of things. One is, do you agree with their assessments? Do you think their assessments are the best assessments we can use?
Well, they gave us a list of approved assessments to select from, and one of the assessment tools that we already use was on that list. There are some other optional other assessments that are on there.
We have a committee.
Yep, and we have a committee that's actually looking at the universal screeners right now.
Good, and I probably don't need to say this, but we're not interested in meeting the minimum requirements for anything. We're trying to do the best job we can for the district. I'm sure you feel the same way. The summer reading program, and Ken Crumwoody is a huge advocate of this, and I tend to agree with him, especially in light of what I think is a political decision on the retention rather than an educational decision. But in light of that, a solid summer reading program is not cheap. Is there any money following this? Is it an unfunded mandate?
Currently, it is an unfunded mandate.
All right, thank you very much.
I don't want to get into too much discussion. They're still in the presentation, but I'll take one more. Director Dickman?
You mentioned the 90 minutes. Is that continuous, or is that broken up throughout the day?
I do
in our
not believe,
district?
we have a protected 90 minutes.
Okay.
And there is a difference between protected and uninterrupted. So
Okay.
we have a protected 90 minutes.
Okay, but it's not necessarily continuous. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for letting us interrupt a little bit. Go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the universal screener, as well as the need to progress monitor those students who are at risk or substantially deficient weekly. So we have some of the data collection points that we use. In kindergarten, the state-approved screener that we have selected is AIMSweb. That was different than what we used in the past. We were using Dibbles, but that was not approved at the kindergarten level, so we have switched to AIMSweb this year. We do that 3 times a year for the universal screener. In first grade, we use Dibbles 3 times a year. Second grade, Dibbles 3 times a year, as well as we have Iowa assessment data. In third, fourth, and fifth grade, we use Dibbles 3 times a year. SRI or MAP in a few of our buildings is also 3 times a year. And we also have Iowa assessment data. Kindergarten through fifth grade, we do have, after the universal screener is administered, any student who is flagged as at risk or after multiple benchmark points would be substantially deficient. We do have diagnostic assessments available, so they will take that data to pinpoint skill deficits. So that is based on being flagged on the universal screener. 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, there is SRI given 3 times a year and Iowa assessment data collected. And then 10th and 11th grade, we have Iowa assessments, and we always have district reading assessments or end of course assessments to go along with these data points.
We have lots of different teams of teachers and administrators that look at the data in different ways. Starting with our district student achievement team, we look at all of those major data points, our benchmark data, our end of term data at kindergarten through 12th grade, and then we also put attendance and behavior data alongside that so that we can draw some conclusions from it. Our reading instruction coaches meet monthly to hold a data team meeting around our benchmark data, and they help guide some decisions for how they can support teachers and classrooms in improving those scores. Buildings, every building has a building student achievement team that meets at least twice a month. A lot of them meet weekly, but they meet at least twice a month, where they review just their building data to make decisions for their building, which could be instructional strategies that they need to put in place. It could be leadership strategies or programmatic strategies, like adding the 95% group. We also have teams, response to intervention teams, where they're focused on individual student data instead of looking at big picture. And then our grade level data teams meet weekly. So those are teams of teachers that collaborate around data that pertains to their classroom. All teams, regardless of which level they are, they all follow the decision making for results process, which is to collect the data and analyze it, including looking at what are those other influences and making inferences about it, setting goals, selecting strategies, and then following up on those strategies to see if they're having an impact. So that is our district process for reviewing data from district level all the way down to teacher teams. That's everything we have.
So we're happy to answer any questions you have.
I imagine there might be a few. Anything from the board? Director Sherwood.
Our superintendent has recommended that one of the options that we have for budget reductions is to reduce reading specialists. In your opinion, how's that going to impact your efforts?
What we hope to be able to do is to look at the positions that are included in our teacher leadership and compensation system and do some switching around and be able to keep those kinds of positions in our building. We feel that they're very important. They have a lot of work to do. The coaches are in the classroom helping teachers to become better teachers of reading. The interventionists are meeting with very small groups of students all day long to help bring them up to speed. So we want, while we may have to be switching some positions, I completely support the use of coaches and interventionists in our district.
Yeah, and I have a concern that in some places the level of expertise probably should not be expected in a regular classroom teacher. And so coaches is one thing, but the reading specialist, that's a different ballgame for me. Would you categorize those as two different kinds of levels of expertise?
I believe that our reading specialists and our coaches have tremendous knowledge. They both have the same credentials required for those positions. They both receive considerable professional development in order to do what they do, so that the reading interventionist typically has a specific curriculum that they use with a very small group of students, and they have to make lots of judgment decisions on how to group those kids and how to move them forward, where the coaches are having to work with all of the classroom teachers to help them to fine-tune their practices so that they're improving in the core, so that we can get our 80% of our students up to benchmark in the core.
Okay, thank you. And one more question. This summer reading thing, as I mentioned before, Director Crumwitty has told me repeatedly it's an expensive adventure to do this, effective in his mind, but very expensive. Where are we going to get the bucks to do this if it's mandated?
Well, I know that right now they are in the Department of Education looking at how they are going to fund this. So while it's an unfunded mandate right now, it doesn't go into place until 2017. So that's one of the things they're working on. We have to consider that they will find the money. But we have been able to have, I think, 7 sites.
7 to 9.
Seven to 9 sites every summer. Now, that'll ramp up because we'll really have more students that we're going to require that they attend, and we'll also be including special education. But we need to prioritize that, because I truly, as you do, believe that our summer reading program is a way to meet some kids and help them to, if nothing else, eliminate summer reading loss.
Yeah, I agree. And Director Crumwitty stresses that he believes that there's a coercive value in the retention thing, that very few kids get retained in his experience. And I hope I'm characterizing his statements correctly. I think I am. But very few kids get retained because the summer intervention saves them. It helps, but that's got to be intensive and well-staffed and so forth. And also the parents have to know what's coming. Are we sharing this information with our kindergarten parents right now, that there's going to be this test at the 3rd grade that might impact their future of their children?
Exactly. We have a communication plan that Dawn Saul and I have worked on, so that we're going right now. This was our first step in communicating, because we wanted to get this information to the board. We'll be going to all of the principals' meetings this week and into November. In November, for the elementary principals, we're bringing in the literacy coaches so that they learn this information in detail. Then they will go back to talk to their staff. Dawn has a plan for how to communicate this with our stakeholders, including our parents. So yes, in the communication of this is extremely important. I want to go back to your summer reading and the 3rd grade retention. We had a board policy a few years ago that students were retained at the end of 2nd grade if they did not meet our grade level standards. And it is true that through our summer reading program, we were able to catch a lot of students up. We also, just like in this law, had some what do we call that? Oh, yes, good cause exemptions, so that if a student goes to summer school, starts to show progress, comes out of summer school with a very solid plan for the following year, that the teachers and the parents and everybody agree that we're starting to see progress, then the student doesn't get retained. And that's what we did with our second graders when we had this as part of our board policy.
Were there still a few that did get retained, however?
There occasionally were, but not, we were able to get quite a few through. And retention, you know, it's always a conversation with parents and everything, and what's the best interest of the child.
And are we developing a plan, and I know we have some parents that voluntarily retain their kids occasionally, but are we developing a plan to deal with the emotional fallout of that kind of a thing with these kids?
We have not even begun to scratch the surface on all of the considerations that need to go in with this third grade retention, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any additional discussion? Director DeFau.
For my own clarification, the summer reading program that you're referring to is the Stepping Stones model, not the summer reading program that was offered at Truman School several years ago.
What that has morphed into, you may call this the Stepping Stones just because we partnered with Shaney Ford and that whole team to deliver our summer reading program because we expanded. It has grown tremendously. We have it I want to say that we have it at 7 sites where those are specific for those buildings. So Hayes, Buchanan, Fillmore, Washington, they have enough students that qualify for summer literacy that they fill their programs. And then we have either 1 or 2 satellite sites that serve the rest of the district. So what you remember from Truman, or we've done it at a couple different sites, has grown. So Stepping Stone still does some components of this. They'll organize the before and after school breakfast lunch program. They'll organize the field trips. But as far as what we teach and what teachers' professional development, that falls into the hands of both Beth and Tara right now. They handle all of that.
But it's offered in the context of the larger program. It's not just the literacy program.
No,
There's both.
yes, yeah.
Yep, there's an enrichment
Right.
program, and then there's also the summer intensive reading program. So you have 2 separate programs.
Okay, that's helpful. Talk to me a little bit about the second grader who scores proficient in comprehension, reading comprehension, but scores below grade level in proficiency. How do you...
Like Iowa assessments or?
No, I'm even talking on the DIBELS or
Okay.
the intermittent testing that we do during the school year. Are we giving equal weight to fluency and comprehension, and would that student in fact be retained if they were, proficient in reading comprehension, but simply could not read quickly out loud?
So that component of the question is if they're below benchmark. But I'm going to let Tara talk to you a little bit about what we do in those kinds of circumstances.
All right. The DIBELS does have just a very small reading comprehension piece. It's much more heavily fluency based, so we do have those kids that just aren't fast readers. So through this law, we don't have all the information on it yet, but there will be an opportunity for alternative assessments, so students can show they're proficient on that. They could show they're proficient on their Iowa assessment. If they're proficient there, then they would move on. And then there will also be portfolio requirements. We don't know what those requirements will be yet, but they'll be able to show proficiency through a portfolio, which will provide a bigger picture for those students than just the fluency. So I think we would be able to hit those students in one of those 3 ways.
Okay, so we are still measuring read aloud and using that as a proficiency measure.
We are still measuring on DIBELS, yes. They have an accuracy score, so are they reading it accurately, a rate score, and then also a retell of the passage.
Okay, because I think there are some children that just regardless are never going to be able to read aloud and not hesitate.
So for those students, we would be able to identify them early, starting in first grade even, and identify what is their reasoning for not being a fluent reader, work to remediate that accuracy piece of it so that they can understand what they're reading, and then use either the portfolio or alternative assessments to show their proficiency and their growth.
Okay. I'll withhold.
Additional discussion. Director Sherwood.
Just to follow up on Director DeFaw's question, when you're talking about DIBELS and having an assessment that isn't proficient, and then kind of going through this list of other assessments, it almost sounds like you're shopping for an assessment that's going to give you what you want to see. Is there a point here that we have a problem and we kind of cover that up by other assessments?
No. In fact, the universal screeners that we are able to use, there's a very brief list that's been approved by the state, and we're what we're doing is, and this is a charge given us by the district student achievement team, is to review what we're currently doing, make sure that those tools that we use are the appropriate tools that are going to give us the information that we need to make these decisions. And if our current tools are not the right ones, or if there's a better tool out there, to consider changing. Because what we want is the most accurate, the most reliable, ones that is going to give us the most generalizable results, because we've got to make very sound decisions based on this information. So
I agree, it's a big deal.
The committee, that's exactly what the committee's doing.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I've got a couple of questions. Oh, there they are. Is all of this consistent with the Iowa Core?
Do you want to talk about fluency, that's all
Well, what they're asking us to do, the universal screening, we are looking to see that the students have those foundational skills in place, and that is present in the core. And then the progress, all those things do align, the progress monitoring, to ensure that we are helping to remediate or make progress toward gaining those skills. The instruction, the intensive instruction, these things, the small group instruction, the reduced teacher-student ratios, all of those are going to, we can apply core to any of those things. So when we're talking like our informational text standards or our literature standards, those can be done whole groups, small groups. So I don't think that they're necessarily dictating core standards to teach.
Do you already have the curriculum written for all of this?
We currently have treasures in majority of our buildings, the Treasures reading series at the elementary level, and then we have a few buildings that are using Reading Mastery. We have one building that uses Success for All. That it is 90 minutes at minimum is kind of what we're doing. So we're actually we're above the 90-minute requirement for that.
So I had a great benefit of visiting with some of the curriculum people a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things, when I look at everything you're doing, there's so much screening and assessments, or the appearance is. You talk about universal screening, you talk about state approved, and then in the next page, I think you talk about all sorts of assessments, 3 times a year, this is once a year. And during that discussion that we had, there was a suggestion that some assessments may not be aligned with the core. And that was kind of alarming to me. I was wondering if you can address that. Is there an alignment between the assessments, the screenings, and the education?
The assessments that we use that were listed down at the bottom, the district assessments, we did align the Treasures assessments. We adjusted from the 6-unit assessments and aligned into quarterly assessments with the core, so we actually have the core standards that each question addresses listed on our assessments. So that is for, and I can speak to the elementary ones. When we get into the secondary, I know that the curriculum that they have written, they have aligned to the core.
But I guess my question is that, like a state-approved universal screening tool, Do you know whether that is aligned with the core?
Yes, because the ones that we're using, like the Dibbles ones, we're working toward those foundational skills. So that is aligned to the core. When we get into the SRI, SMI, MAP, those assessments, they have the newer version of the SMI and SRI are the college and career readiness that are aligned to the core. Are there other ones that we?
One of the issues that we discussed when you met with us is that the Iowa assessment currently is not a very completely close alignment with the core, and that's why the state of Iowa is currently looking at either a new Iowa assessment or going with Smarter Balanced.
And I guess that's part of my frustration is it sounds like the state is requiring us to do something that they haven't figured out what they really want us to do. And that frustrates me. I guess I'll leave it at that. Any additional discussion? Director Dickman.
Do we have any maximum amount or cap on the limit of time for continuous instruction? I know we have the brain breaks. I wasn't sure if there's any specific notes about, student every, 20 minutes or whatnot, or how continuous the instruction's allowed to be, because obviously with especially the younger kids, there's diminishing returns the longer you spend on it continuously.
To my knowledge, we do not have kind of a set amount of time that would be a maximum amount of time. I think that with the coaches and the leads and the mentor teachers, they're going to help teachers realize what that too much time is. So when they can, an outsider coming in can see when the students have hit that point that that's your maximum, you need to stop there, especially with that grade level. But as far as I know, set in stone, we do not have.
The block of reading is also broken up into different components so that you have to regroup into small group or get together for whole group. And so there's a lot of activity that goes on in that reading block. A teacher would find it difficult to go too far beyond the amount of time that we have designated as our reading block, simply because they've got to get their 60 minutes of math block in. They've got their science and social studies block. So the day is fairly well packed with all the core subjects.
Is there any other discussion? All right, thank you. It was, Julie, and was it Tara with a T?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Tara. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. Move on to board protocols and processes. I'm going to lead this discussion. This is, I just want to understand a little bit where the board wants to go with respect to our meetings. You all know that I get a lot of suggestions from the board members, the individual board members, on this is too long, this is too short, this isn't prioritized properly. So I just want to have an open discussion on this. First is, I ask, should we follow Robert's rules more closely? Just a couple of, Robert's rules is very, very prescriptive and precise. One of the things that it generally allows is that the president does not vote except in tie votes. And we've discussed this in the past. Any thoughts on that? I'm just going to ask for quick thoughts, and I'll put together my ideas later on what I think the board is asking for. Director DeFow.
If we're on the hook for a vote, so are you.
Okay. Any other thoughts? All right. Another idea in Robert's rules, it talks about limiting the discussion opportunities that a member has, and really what it's trying to do is get at the idea that everybody is able to speak before you speak again. So I think what I would say is that I generally try to allow discussion. I think the board is generally respectful of time, but we could limit discussion to you only get to speak until everybody else has spoken before you get a chance to speak again. That's an idea of trying to follow the rules more closely. Any thoughts? Director Sherwood.
I guess I wouldn't do that, but I don't think it would hurt to introduce the idea of the ability to move to end debate, so that you would end the conversation by vote. That would be a different kind of thing, but there may be times that we run on and keep saying the same thing over and over, and it doesn't happen very often, but there are points that I probably would have moved to end debate on some things, and that probably other people feel the same way. So there's that.
Okay. End debate is an appropriate motion, and I'll get the information out on how that works. Any other thoughts? Okay, I'm going to move on. I've just got a list here. I'll try to move through quickly. Should there be time limits on discussions? Jamie, I'm sorry, Director Snyder, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I don't think there should be time limits. I think every discussion is unique. Every discussion has multiple topics. Some are going to take longer than others. I'm not advocating that we're here till midnight, but I'm afraid of the repercussions of limiting discussions that we don't get all of our points made.
Anybody else? Director DeFau.
And I don't know that I'm keen on a limit. I do think there are times that we've exceeded, as Director Sherwood said, any reasonable further conversation about a topic. What I would probably advocate for more, and something we did tonight, is being able to modify the agenda to meet needs. At 9:30 at night, I'm not at the top of my game to have an in-depth conversation about budget. I would much rather do that at 6:35 like we did this evening, so that we can be fresh and have a better dialogue and better exchange of ideas. So I really appreciated the opportunity to do that this evening. I'm sure that we will have other opportunities to do that as well.
Thank you for those comments. I want to mention that occasionally one of you will ask if we can change the agenda, and that is precisely what happened tonight. Director DeFau asked if we could move the discussion on budget up to that very point that we did. I checked with the superintendent. There was no reason not to. I think the logic was sound. And frankly, it's just something when it was mentioned to me, I went, yeah, why didn't I think of that? So I would count on all of the board to think about those things and bring them up. Director Sherwood.
Yeah, along those same lines, the board reports, when we talk, dead last, and if we have something we think is worthwhile communicating to the community, they're not here, when we're going to have these board reports, so it doesn't get heard. It's like whether a tree, it makes a noise when it falls in the forest. Who cares? I would think that we should think about flip-flopping the consent agenda with that, because I don't think it takes a whole lot more time. We don't usually spend a ton of time on these things, but tonight, for instance, I've got a couple of things I want to talk about that I'd like to have the public hear about. But we don't have the opportunity to have that dead last year.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Tate.
Just talking about flipping agenda items, it could be with a very important item like we had tonight that some people might wait till later in the meeting to come because they understand how long it takes. And we may have preempted somebody, and I'm not sure, Ty, if that affects you or not, that maybe you were going to come in and wait till the last. So I think where it's not a bad idea, we need to think about that and maybe do it and put it in the agenda itself when it's published, as opposed to just flipping it that night.
That's a very good point. I had someone actually call me and ask when they thought that item would come up, and I had said, I was pretty conservative, so I said, 6:30 or 7, and which gave us enough time. But you're absolutely right; that would have been an issue.
Okay, thank you. What about time limits on meetings? Anybody?
I don't know about specifically limiting the time meetings so much as trying to manage the agenda. As Director DeFaul said, you know, at 9:30 my brain is not quite as keen as it was at 6:30. So managing the agenda and trying to make sure that we don't have at least complex discussions scheduled for the end of the meeting.
We are going to talk about the agenda in a little bit. Okay, any other Director DeFaul?
Yeah, and I guess I would say the night that we were here until 11:30 at night was ridiculous. Sorry. And I think it's disrespectful of our staff and their time. They have to be back here early in the morning, and, you know, they're in it with us for the long haul. We're not as effective as we could be. I certainly am not at 11:30 at night when I left my house at 7:30 in the morning. And I'm going home at 11:30 at night, which happened that day. You know, so I am very hard pressed to think that there should be a real need, especially when we're starting an hour earlier in our game plan, to be here after 10 o'clock. And even then, you're talking about a 4-hour meeting, half a work day, with a 5-minute break.
6.
Jamie took 10, but who's counting? Anyway.
So are you advocating for a time limit on the meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
I guess I would. And I know that we've done that by, you know, moving things off the agenda as the nights progressed. And I would support doing that when that is warranted.
Okay. Any other discussion on time limits on the meetings? Director Snyder.
How would that work? How would that work with an agenda? Would we have to make a motion to postpone or something for each item we didn't get to? Or I guess
No.
that would only be action items, wouldn't it?
No, yeah, action items, and oftentimes, as Director DeFaul said, when we sense that there's something that it's going to take too long here, we may move a discussion on policies. And we can figure out that part and do some of that on the fly. If we make a decision that, for instance, we don't want to go more than 4 hours. Any other discussion on this? Director
Yeah,
Sherwood?
Rather than just having a set limit, I think you do that, and that's traditionally what we have done. I've been here 4 years, and I can't remember 2 or 3 times that we ran really long, because often we'll say, why don't we postpone this until next time, and that sort of thing. So I guess I think you can manage that inside the current structure if it's done.
Okay, any other discussion there? We'll move on. So should every board member's request for information or agenda item be considered or put on the agenda? Is the board willing to give the agenda committee authority to deny agenda requests if it is not related to board priorities? I'm going to ask Director Kluhl, because that's one that you have really talked about, is the alignment of requests and discussions with board priorities. Can you talk on that for a minute?
Yeah, I don't want to come off as the bad guy that says the agenda committee is going to deny any board member's request for information. I do think what I'm hoping to do with the agenda committee is to think about what the board's role is in terms of trying to move issues along. I think that sometimes, perhaps as an agenda committee, we take on items, put them in the cow, or sometimes on discussion that perhaps are not inappropriate for the board to talk about, but certainly there are other issues in terms of policy and vision that we probably ought to spend our time on that get knocked off because they're not the issue that a board member has brought up. So that whole issue of a board member bringing up an issue for agenda or for information is very interesting. I don't see any of us saying that a board member should be denied the opportunity to have information from the superintendent, but I think that we need to use some discretion in terms of agenda items. And I think that perhaps at some point we'll be able to have an opportunity to have a discussion on the board about that, about what our role as a board is, what administration's role is, and perhaps narrow down some of the items that come up on the agenda. Because this is all systemic in terms of, you know, do the board meetings go too long? Should we limit discussion? Well, perhaps, you know, at the very front of this, we start to decide what it is that we're going to talk about will help us out with some of those later issues.
Any other discussion on that? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, I guess it all comes down to me, kind of down to numbers. You're talking about 3 board members on the agenda committee, 2 of which make a majority on that committee. So 2 board members can nullify the wish of a board member without the input of the rest of the board, and I have a problem with that, I guess. I would have no problem with what you've done with me once, is to ask a board member to come in and kind of justify what they're asking for and why they want it, because I think we should be held to some kind of a standard as far as what we put on the agenda. I think that's reasonable, but to have kind of just an arbitrary power reduced to 2 people, I don't like that idea.
Any other? Director Dickman.
I think that the agenda committee is given plenty of discretion on how to prioritize when we talk about things, and sometimes that almost does lead to an item being vetoed because it just falls so far behind in the priorities. But I'm also uncomfortable with the idea of the agenda committee being able to veto an idea.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Should we discuss, well, I guess this is really, has already been discussed. I won't even ask that question. Over the past years, I have cut off discussion twice that I can recall. And I probably get admonished for those 2 at least a couple times a year. And they happen to be during sessions that were really time critical, but the issues were critical as well. Should the board president have that authority to stop discussion? Director Kluhl.
Well, I think certainly if it's not germane, if we're following Robert's rules, I think that the board president would be expected to do that.
These cases were not an issue of whether they were germane. It was an issue of time.
A difficult issue. I mean, we expect the board president to moderate here. But being personally familiar with one of those issues that was shushed, I think that has not happened. So I don't believe it's any longer an issue.
Okay, thank you. Director DeFau.
Wouldn't that be applicable to the move to end debate motion that Director Sherwood mentioned?
It probably is. It's probably just that the president took unexpected latitude in making that decision in the past. Thank you for that clarification. Anything else, Director Sherwood?
I do think it's appropriate, when you're talking about limiting debate as far as time, I think it's appropriate that if you think there's a time crunch on the agenda, that you could ask the board to, as a group, set a time limit on debate. I think that might be something that could be done.
Thanks. And I think in one of those cases, in fact, a couple, not here, but we have in the past set like half-hour limits on discussions during committee of the whole. Thank you for that. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on. I do want to talk about agenda management a little bit. This has been mentioned in the past, and I will describe that the agenda committee does try to project how long is this going to take, that going to take. It tries to be reasonable, I think, in its thinking. Now, maybe it's not conservative in its thinking and figures that something is only going to take 20 minutes and it ends up taking 40 minutes. I don't know if there are any specific ideas on agenda management here. Director DeFau.
Well, and an observation that as we move into our budget discussions, I think that we need to exercise caution with extraneous agenda items. So, and sometimes I feel that having both a community presentation and a showcase is over and beyond what we should be building into our agenda when we know we're going to have 45 minutes of open forum and a lengthy conversation about an agenda item. I know people look forward to being able to share with us what they're doing, and it's an important part of what we do. But, and some of it falls to us too in terms of extraneous conversation after presentations. But the other night, it was an hour and 40 minutes, well, almost, by the time we got to our business after we had 2 presentations. And we can't start our business at 8 at night or 7:45 at night. It's just...
Thank you. In fact, we're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes. Director Sherwood.
It's pretty widely used practice to cut down on the amount of time on the agenda by transferring items to the consent agenda. Is there a possibility that we're underusing the consent agenda on some of these things?
There could be. I haven't considered that, but the agenda committee can look at that.
Yeah, if it looks like things that we generally have consensus on, then board members are always able to pull it off, but it keeps us from having to spend the time to go through things that are just going to be bam, bam, bam anyway.
Sure. Nice idea. Director Dickman.
I think there are certain things that we could delegate to administration or committee. I've complained previously about construction discussions that we have. I think our administrators are the ones who are in the buildings and that they are very familiar with what they need. So like with the central pool and auditorium, we spent a considerable amount of time reviewing preliminary designs. When I think the people who are working in that building might be able to clarify more of that, and we could have a more limited role.
Director DeFile.
And using that specific example, I guess I would disagree, because part of the reason that project got so out of hand is because there was no one saying no. And there was no one saying the gold standard wasn't necessarily what was required. And that's why we ended up with a project that exceeded some of the standards that you would find in professional theaters and many universities that are in our region. So yeah, I do think that there has to be some check and balance.
Anything else?
For me, that I'm not sure that we're qualified to know what the standard should be. You have more knowledge in the theater area, so you know something about this, but in general construction, that sort of thing, most of us don't have the knowledge to make those kinds of determinations. But there is the informational aspect of these things for the public. The public has a right to know where things are going and what the expectations are and that sort of thing. But I'm wondering if it's not possible to do those kinds of presentations in a separate meeting. To have a public meeting on Central, for instance, that we could attend if we wish, but it wouldn't necessarily be brought here on the preliminary work. I'm just thinking here that maybe there's no way to reallocate time on some of these things. So.
And I would say, I mean, this is a tough deal. The administration and Mr. Maloney in particular spends a lot of time doing this, and we do have the responsibility of making some of these decisions on the architect, on the engineer, as we did earlier tonight, on some of the preliminary designs, and you all are going to find that we're going to be very interested in the long-range plan very quickly for a variety of reasons, but the approach to the long-range plan has been the way that it's been for the past several years. And there may be reasons that the board actually wants to be more involved in it and to help direct at least the general direction. But on something like the pool, whew, I mean, that was a tough deal. That was really, really tough. So I understand what's being said. I'll try to think about it. Okay, a couple of these have been requested by certain of you, and so I'm going to ask for you to start the discussion. One is Director Sherwood asked if we should have open forum be longer than 2 minutes. And I suggested that this be brought up at this meeting, or at this discussion item. Director Sherwood, would you talk about that for a minute?
Yes, in my background is with the city, and I currently sit as the chair of the City Sustainability Commission, and we have public input there as well. And it's 5 minutes for the city, and I have sat here and seen a number of times when people are very frustrated when they have something to say and they're limited with 2 minutes. That an extra minute or two would have satisfied them. They wouldn't have gone away as nearly as upset as they had been. And often, seldom we get big crowds at that podium as we do tonight. And I think if there's a need to limit it, that you should have the authority to do that by the meeting. But generally speaking, I think folks ought to be given more time to have their say. 2 minutes is a very, very limited amount of time.
Any other thoughts on this? Director Defoe.
I would say I've been on both sides of the podium rather frequently in the past, and I appreciate that there were times even for myself that 2 minutes wasn't sufficient. And I have seen nights when there were 100 or more people here and 40 people or 50 people at open forum, and you start talking about 5 minutes, and that gets onerous.
That's why I said that Ralph should have the ability to change it, but we shouldn't hinder everyone at every meeting because of the occasional situation.
Director Dickman.
I think that we could perhaps stick with the 2 minutes as the standard, and if we have less than a set number of open forum requests, then we could allot 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that. Like tonight, we only had 10 requests, so an extra minute each. If they had even planned on using it, would not have been an unreasonable burden of time, but we could keep it at 2 minutes when we have 30, 40, 50 people.
Anything else? Yeah, there are times I gotta say that I feel a little bit uncomfortable. You know that somebody has another 30 seconds or a minute, and then I cut them off. It feels uncomfortable from my perspective. And I guess what I'd ask is just that I have a little bit of latitude on that. If I have a little bit, and you've seen sometimes, because you can sense that somebody's only got 5 seconds left, go ahead and wrap it up. I don't sense that we have to be super restrictive, but in my words, as I try to figure out what the consensus is, I'll try and put something together there. Let me move on to showcases and presentations. How strict are we? The superintendent, I think, tells presenters that they'll have 10 minutes. And so, but I don't think, I'm very uncomfortable in right during the middle of a presentation saying, well, you've had your 10 minutes. So sometimes, and one of you expressed already that they are excited. They want to present to the community and to us. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer. And then we end up with discussion. Now, we could limit the discussion on showcases and presentations to a certain amount of time. What do you think? Director Sherwood.
I personally have learned an enormous amount about elementary, especially elementary, and in the district by these presentations. And if they go too long, I guess that's just the price you pay for that a little bit, as long as Dr. Tate yells at them afterward about it. That'd be the But I wouldn't hinder the creativity of these folks to come to us, because we've seen some wonderful stuff. And you might just, you could probably just remind the board that we're limited on time. Please keep your questions limited if that's the situation. I would talk less in a situation like that.
Director Defoe.
And I guess I would prefer to see us, especially when we have very contentious is not the right word, but very controversial or complicated items on the agenda, such as the budget, that we limit to one, a showcase, not a showcase and a presentation. You know, just doing that alone can carve 20 minutes off of our meeting time. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we, say, "Oops, sorry, you got to stop now," like we do with the open forum presentations. I think that in itself would be of benefit.
Okay, anything else? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The thing I would do, though, is I would cut the presentation, because I'll tell you what, these things by the schools have a way of calming a very upset audience down. When they start seeing these kids, they start seeing what the kind of good things we're doing. It's a little bit of the hostility leaves them, and I've seen that happen over and over again on a hot button issue. So it's very good PR for us. It's a way to kind of moderate the feelings in the room by having those kids here, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Director Snyder.
And in regards to those showcases, there's always hopefully a lot of kids involved in those showcases too, and I certainly wouldn't want to step on their toes and limit them in any way, because as with that young lady tonight, I think she did an outstanding job, and there's no way I would want to hinder that.
Thank you. Director Dickman.
I would be comfortable with setting a time limit on our questions and comments, because I think that sometimes can even be longer than the presentation, as we get all excited talking to them because we think it's fascinating. And so even if we just had a little, we cut ourselves off like we do at the open forum, and then that would maybe be as a reminder, like, all right, one last question, and then we finish up the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Director Defoe.
Yeah, and along that line, how many times does somebody have to be thanked? If we could even concede that the president, on behalf of the board, thanks who's presenting, depending on where you fall on that line, saying thanks for the 7th time really, isn't a value added for me.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, I'm just about done. Maria suggested a formal written response to all open forum comments. So, Director Dickman, would you talk a little bit about what you're thinking there?
More specifically, I'm thinking of the open forum when people come up and it's not about an issue that we're going to be voting on, or at least not in the foreseeable future. Tonight we had people that came up and mostly talked about the block or traditional or the bluegrass situation, and they had their comments or questions answered for the most part, or will when we decide on about what we're doing with that. But there have been other times I had someone contact me about the bluegrass situation with 29 students in the 5th grade class, and they were under the impression that the board didn't, or the administration didn't do anything because they had never gotten a formal response about what that was. And I know that there's budgetary reasons and things like that that had already been considered, but I think that it would help with our community outreach if, when there is an issue that is not being addressed by a vote in the foreseeable future, if an effort was made to reach out to that community member and say, I know that you are upset about your tag student or formerly tag student no longer qualifying for the tag program. We will, continue to look into it, or something along those lines, so that they do feel that they're being heard, as opposed to just thinking that it got, in one ear and out the other.
Any other discussion on this item?
Just
Director Sherwood.
For clarification, my impression has been most of the time when we have somebody that's upset like that somebody does reach out to them on the way out the door. Is that correct?
In some cases, not all,
No.
because sometimes there's not an answer
Yeah.
to it. But I know we've had somebody who had a misconception, and I've seen Rachel run after people and intercept them. But it's not always that we do it. We try to, but again, some things are unanswerable.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but where there might be at least a sympathetic ear, it would be a good idea to do that.
Yeah, and probably half the time I see people, running out trying to intercept them.
Director DeFau.
Yeah, and I would say in past experience that others that have sat behind us have availed themselves to leave and to talk to somebody when they've been, obviously upset about a certain subject that they presented to us to get more information. So, I don't know if we want to be more deliberate about that, or to, I don't know that anything would require a report back necessarily to the board, but at least if we had some assurance that the appropriate follow-up occurred.
Anything else? One of the things on this that, we all write different documents for different reasons, but I think about the difficulty in writing a letter to somebody, because the letter would probably have to be written by our board secretary, and she would have to try to interpret what the board or the district's position is. And sometimes that's hard even for me to figure out. So I think we'll just take it as an idea and move forward with it. Okay,
One
Director
last
Sherwood.
point.
Sure.
It might not be a bad idea to have a resource sheet that if we have an upset person, that the minimum that happens, even if there's not an answer correct, that comes right to the top of our head, but a resource sheet saying, if you'd like to further discuss this, here are the personnel that are available to you with their contact information, that kind of stuff, and just at least hand them that before they leave the room. Something so they get a sense that they have avenues besides just going home and spitting and cussing.
Thank you for that idea, Director Dickman.
I think that the idea that's somewhat been suggested of having staff members try to make a conscious effort when they see someone who is upset or has brought to our attention something that is not going to be addressed by a vote, just to, I guess, an unofficial directive to have staff members talk to them about that issue. And maybe a resource sheet there too.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this item? Tell you what, in about 15 minutes, it's going to be 4 hours. So hopefully we'll be done in about 14 minutes. Are there any other concerns by the board with respect to how we conduct our meetings that you want to bring up at this time? Director Kluhl.
Just one issue with Robert's rules. I think it would be good to respect the opportunity for each speaker to have time to speak before a director speaks a second time. I think it would be a good idea to make sure that all other speakers have had a chance first.
Okay, thank you. Any additional discussion? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, and I just want to say that over the last few years, I've become very impressed with your ability to handle these meetings. They're complex things, and it's difficult. And I know there's some rough edges. That's just the nature of the beast. But overall, appreciate the kind of work you do.
Thank you. Director Dickman.
I actually have an opposing perspective to Director Kluhl on the having everyone have a turn to speak before someone speaks twice. There might be some issues that a director is not as enthusiastic about, and I feel like it needlessly adds work and complication to your job to have to double check that everyone has had the opportunity to speak, whereas I think that it's unofficially built into the rules that if I've already spoken and Director Snyder hasn't already spoken and both of us are kind of raising our hands, that you would call on him first. I don't know if we have to make that an official directive.
Okay, thank you. And I think generally that's the way that I try to approach it, but I may not catch everybody all the time. So anything else? If not, we'll conclude this. Thank you very much for your input. We'll move on to, the administrative report, balanced enrollment report. Superintendent Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Snaden's going to report on this in just a second. I think it's unconscionable if we have to send somebody out of their own neighborhood to balance enroll in another school, but that's just the way that it is, and especially when we got to the point that our boundaries just weren't accommodating the number of students we had in a neighborhood. So we did make the changes to the boundary. You put in a very strict transfer policy, and that's really helped us so that we have fewer balanced enrollments by about 50%. So I think that's a great report, but again, it was because of the boundaries you set and the fact that we have a strict transfer policy, and you supported me on it. So, Mr. Snaden, what do we have?
I just want to highlight a couple of things in that report you received. One is some changes, as Dr. Tate started to say. Last year we had 259 students that we had to balance enroll, and this year to date it's 107. So we've more than cut that in half. That was one of the highlights of it. I think the other thing we're doing a little bit differently this year is quarterly we're taking a look at the enrollments. This came actually from the building principals and secretaries. We're keeping track of the master list here at central office when a student is balanced enrolled. So at the end of the quarter, if there's room in their home school, we're making the call to the family, inviting them back to their home school if they choose to go. If they don't want to go now, they can keep their name on the list, and we'll invite them back at the end of the year. But if they want to go, we make arrangements for them to leave at this time. And we're going to keep track of that by the quarter. The only master list that's being kept is here at central office. Each building isn't keeping their own list because occasionally some students wouldn't be invited back as quickly as they should be based on where they were on the list. So this way we can make sure that that happens. And the other thing, I guess I would say that the range ranged, the largest number of kids that had to be sent from a school was from Adams School this year. We had 20 students, excuse me, they got balanced out to 5 different schools. And the least was Hayes and Fillmore, 2 or 3 students. Then we looked at the students that we were concerned about that were at 100% capacity, the Garfield, Harrison, and Washington. No students were sent back from Washington. 5 from Harrison, that's remarkable. And 19 students from Garfield had to be balanced enrolled to another school. And that's the highlight of what you have in that report. It breaks it down by grade level. It tells you what school they were sent from and what school they went to. If you have any other questions, I guess.
Okay, thank you for your report. Questions, comments? Director Sherwood.
Have we seen any relationship between the boundaries and our decline in enrollment? Have we looked at any of these kids, or these kids that are being balanced out, any of these kids leaving the district?
Did we lose any of those kids? I don't. We're actually meeting tomorrow to get a report together for Dr. Tate. We're looking at numbers. Where did these kids go? And that's one of the things I suppose we could add to that. I don't know how we would. I'm trying to think how we would get that information.
Well, you know what, kids aren't here anymore.
Well, if they're not
gone,
here,
right?
yeah, we'll probably have that through.
And isn't it possible to look at kids that are not yet in our schools but are siblings of some of these kids? Do we have the ability to do that or not?
If they're not in our schools yet. I don't know
Yeah,
how
so
know
we got a third grader we moved over to another school, and he's got a brother that's coming in next year, and the parents opt not to bring the brother in and move him out. just a possible
Yeah,
scenario.
yeah, that's another one to look at. I don't know that one.
Okay, so.
Anything else? Director DeFau.
Well, and I think, one of the open forum speakers tonight mentioned, the exit interview. And I know we try to capture, why did people leave? And sometimes we're just never going to be able to find out that information. But I think to the extent that we can, it would be very useful.
Agreed.
President has not left because he's irritated or anything. He had another engagement. We'll be back in a minute. Is there any more discussion? Dr. Sherwood?
Is it also possible to look at the if there are students leaving the district because of the strict transfer policy when you're looking at that tomorrow?
We're trying to track down where did each of these kids go that didn't return. Just a sidebar, I just was sharing with Mr. Scott here that we had last year there was 97 students that were not in our assistance program, but they were homeschooled, and this year we have 146. So that's 50 plus kids that we don't have them on the records anywhere because they don't have to report to the school. We're allegedly being homeschooled now. That's 50 more than last year. We don't have names or addresses or whys, but we just have a larger number because they reported in. I think that's interesting as we dig.
Anything else? Director Sherwood.
Would we know if they enrolled someplace else?
Yes, that's one of the things we're looking at. If they've request records to go to another school.
Right, because
That's the way we'll
they
find
can
it.
say they're homeschooled and just booking and avoid the open enrollment.
And then, of course, the siblings of the kids that are balanced to another district, they automatically get to go.
Yes.
So that's another number that's creeping.
Anything else? Great. Thank you very much for the report. And we will move on. Are there any? Oh, that was the administrative report. Are there any additional administrative reports? Okay, thank you. We'll move to board reports requests. I've got a couple of requests. Are there any reports? Director Sherwood.
A couple of things. First, I'd like to extend our condolences to the family of Kazi Diaz. Kazi is a remarkable woman who was, at least in her late 80s, who was a crossing guard for us for a number of years and really nurtured a lot of kids and special ladies. So I want to extend those condolences. There are two trivia nights coming up this weekend. One at Central High School. As you probably know, Central High School has been invited by Representative Loebsack to participate in the 4th of July celebration this next summer in Washington, D.C. as a band. And there's going to cost them about $85,000 to do that. So it's a very pricey kind of thing. They're trying to raise that money without asking parents to pay. So they're finding different ways of doing that, and this trivia night is one of those things. And I'm proposing that we develop a board trivia team because we get these things every once in a while, and I'm hoping you guys will come together and buy a table with me, or two if you can bring a friend. And not just Central, but this is the problem. West has a trivia night for their hunger drive also this Saturday night, and it occurs to me that we need some kind of coordination in the district because we do bump these dates together quite a bit, and if we could figure out a way to keep these guys from having to do that, we can't be two places at once, especially if we have the board team. We're going to be in high demand if I can get you guys to all do this. But I wanted to make you aware that the Central Trivia Night is at, gosh, I can't remember where it is, but where is it?
Me and Billy's. I just heard that today.
Me and Billy's? Me and Billy's, and the West one is at KC's, so, which is a Catholic operation, so I'm not sure if that's conflicting. Poverty Committee. The Poverty Committee has met for the third time and is very dynamic. We've got a really good group there. We keep expanding, and we're having very rich discussions. And as part of that, there is one of the groups that participates with us is sponsoring a thing called the Prosperity Summit, which is an event that's going to take place at the Freight House on the 12th of November, 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 to noon. It's free, and you were all sent an invitation to sign up for that. I would encourage you to do that. There'll be a number of district principals, I think, that will be going. Three? that will be going. And the presenter is a woman named Donna Beagle. And Ms. Beagle is a fascinating woman. A lot of times I don't have much use to some of these national speaker types, but this is a woman who really has the background. She grew up as a migrant farm worker and literally fought her way through the educational process to become a PhD. Very impressive, and she's done a lot of research, and she's got a program, I think, that's worth us listening to. So I would encourage you all to come to that. There's a community schools convention meeting in Naperville, Illinois, November 14th. This is the one that Shaney Ford and I and Rachel went to 2 years ago. Dr. Tate couldn't make it, and I was lucky enough to sit in. And we were extraordinarily impressed about their approach to dealing with high poverty schools by bringing social services into the building. So this is occurring again, and I understand that principals from Madison and Monroe are going to be going along with Shaney Ford, but I would like to also suggest that several members from this board attend this thing as well. It's $150. I know it's a lot of money, but we can avoid probably staying overnight as long as we don't go to the cocktail party afterwards, and save some money there. But I think this would help us get a unified vision of how we might move forward on the issue of poverty. So I would recommend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional reports? All right. I've got 2 requests here. First is from Director Sherwood, 102714, agenda item. I would like a board discussion on sustainability in the district and how we might support sustainability through policy. Director Sherwood, 102714, agenda item. A board discussion on reassessing the long-term plan in light of budget cuts and sustainability considerations. That's the end of our meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. This meeting is adjourned.